See. Hopefully, if I say your name wrong, please forgive me, or correct me. You can have to come off mute and correct me. Danielle,
Yes, Danielle.
perfect. And then is it Yolandi?
Yolanda.
Yolanda, got it. Well, I'm Sandy. I'll be the instructor today, and Alicia is my assistant, hiding back there under the SCORE Nashville chapter. She's going to be on just in the beginning and then probably drop off. So it's hard for me to see the chat or anything when I'm presenting because I'm in this presenting my screen. So if you would just feel free to come off mute, ask questions at any time. I'm totally okay to interrupt me. It will not bother me because should be interactive, and this is going to be kind of a small group this morning. So I want to make sure that if you have questions that we get those answered, or whether it's about what's on the slide, about something before, or something specific to your a business question that you have that might relate to pricing. Please ask away. See what time. All right, it's about 5 minutes after. Let's go ahead and get started, I think. And then, because it will be a full 3 hours. I mean, maybe a little less because we don't have as many people this morning as sometimes. So depending on the questions, it can usually go close to the full 3 hours. I will go about 45 minutes to an hour, and we can take like a little 5-minute break, and then we can come do like another 45 minutes to an hour and then take a little break. So we will have those built in. And then of course I'll stay here if you have questions during those breaks. And then afterwards, if there's questions that you didn't get addressed during or you think about later, then we can spend time afterwards at the end to answer any questions as well. So with that, let's go ahead and, like I said, the first couple slides will just be some housekeeping. So who knows or about SCORE? There's a couple different things about SCORE. There's SCORE, the national chapter, and then there's SCORE, the Nashville chapter, or the SCORE overall, and then Nashville chapter. And SCORE is an entirely volunteer organization. So I'm a volunteer, Alicia is a volunteer, our mentors, our kind of business coaches are all volunteers. So it's a way for people in the business community to give back and to help out others that are like small businesses or startups that are kind of getting going. And then we can provide that support. Does anyone have a SCORE mentor right now? Either Yolanda or Danielle?
No, I signed up for to be matched with one yesterday, but I haven't heard anything back as of yet.
Okay.
I have not signed up yet.
Okay. So we'll talk a little bit about the mentors. So that's one of the kind of the big things is that SCORE provides is mentors, or kind of like your business coach. And then we also do workshops and education and training. We work alongside the SBA, the Small Business Association, but we are not part of that organization, but we do work closely with them to kind of provide this kind of mentorship and education resource alongside kind of the SBA offers different services. But we kind of work together here in Nashville as well as overall the whole country. So I would, they'll get you when you signed up for SCORE Mentor, usually because it's probably over the weekend, but someone usually they return those around really quick as far as pairing you with the right mentor. And it's a great resource because that mentor is a free resource for you to kind of think of it as your business coach, and it can help you in a lot of different areas in your business. And they're there for the life of your business. You can use them as little or as much as you want. Sometimes you have like intense things where you need to kind of work on something and they can help you. And then you may not touch base for a couple months and then you may need again. So they can fluctuate depending on what you need. You drive the relationship as far as what you want to talk about, how often you need to meet. They can meet virtually, they can meet in person. The key thing is when you sign up for a mentor is to make sure you want it in the Nashville chapter if you're here in the Nashville area. Sometimes I have people taking this workshop from other SCORE chapters. So you want to make sure you sign up for one in your chapter, in your geographic area, because then that way you can kind of meet in person, or you can get connected to like local events, as well as like getting that kind of, and they'll know kind of this geographic region and kind of also help you with resources that are local to the area. The other one besides a SCORE mentor, they're subject matter experts, which I'm a subject matter expert, not a mentor. So what we do is mentors like your regular coach you meet with, but then say you have a question about, and they're very good about knowing a broad area of kind of all different types of business questions, business topics, but they may not have a deep expertise in a certain area. So if you had a question about leasing space, the mentor might know some information, but then we have somebody that's a subject matter expert that deals with real estate, and they can bring that SME in to actually go deep dive on like, okay, if you're gonna, rent space, here's the things to think about. Here's what you need to ask the broker, or here, so they can bring that expert, that subject matter expert in for a deeper dive on like kind of a one-on-one situation. So it's a really great resource if you haven't signed up for one. I highly recommend that. Again, it's a free resource, and they can really provide that sounding board and that kind of someone to talk to about different things, where sometimes you may not have that in your friends and families may understand you're in business, but don't really know what you're doing or how it works. And then this mentor can kind of help bring in that kind of business coaching aspect to your business. The other thing that Nashville SCORE, as well as the overall SCORE organization, does is workshops. So of course you're in one today. We have workshops on a variety of topics. Some are done like every quarter, some are done every month, some are done like twice a year. So it just kind of depends on what the workshop is, but we have quite a few different ones, as well as kind of some lunch and learns, like one-time special events. So we just had the women's pitch competition. That was just maybe a month or two ago, but then we do kind of one-off topics or like events. We do these SCORE live, where we actually do once a month. We have an evening down at the Entrepreneur Center, and everybody kind of meets in person since we're all kind of virtual. So that's a once a month event that happens. So different things going on, and you'll be plugged into that. Now that you're on taking this workshop, you'll be on our email list. You'll see about future workshops, as well as these kind of one-off events. And then there's the overall SCORE organization, and that organization also puts on webinars. So you may find something specific that they're teaching that we don't in the Nashville chapter, but you can look at the overall SCORE organization and may find, oh, I want to take that webinar, and those are also free. But there's a kind of two different layers to the education or workshops. So I mentioned, who am I? I'm Tanya DeWald. I'm a volunteer. I'm a subject matter expert. Again, not a business coach, not a mentor, but a subject matter expert. My areas of expertise is 20 plus years in manufacturing and product development. So, and then I've also, in the last several years, of course, we also did services, even though we develop products often. And I'll say this, we'll talk about this during the workshop, but just because you're a service-based business doesn't mean you can't offer products. It doesn't mean you're a product-based business that you can't offer services. So a lot of things we start thinking about kind of combining those two together. Even if you're primarily one or the other, you usually can add another component from the other side onto your business. Product development, so I've launched over 400 products to market. A lot of product marketing, product messaging, product pricing, whether it's a product or a service, a lot of pricing experience with figuring that out in the different types of markets, industries, kind of all over the board. So that's where I would be somebody that they would be bringing, your mentor may bring in for a deep dive on a specific question. Then that I would be that kind of coming in, doing a one-on-one kind of consulting, but it wouldn't be your regular mentor. So just to ask really quickly, who is selling a product and who's primarily a service-based product? If you want to come off mute and let me know.
I'm Danielle, and I'm selling a product. I have a vegan cookie company.
Oh, excellent. Okay. And then Yolanda?
I'm going to be a home organization, and I'm going to be selling the products I'll be selling are the things I will be organizing with. So it'll be a combination business.
Excellent. Excellent. And that's great, because it's good that your product and services. And so for Danielle, I would say when we talk about the service, there's some things that are specific to services. And when we talk about that, I would say keep listening, only because there could be things, and hey, there may be a way to add on services to your business it's like maybe you offer classes and you offer other things that are kind of, cookie classes or other things that, or a subscription service, like a box where you ship cookies a month, I don't know, but there's things you could add on kind of more service-like to your product business. And then of course, Yolanda, you have a service-based business, but then selling those products to those same clients is a great way to kind of maximize your revenue and growth without having to just kind of keep doing more and more service and more time. You can sell products again to help grow your business without adding more time to your day. So excellent. And then, so I was gonna ask a really quick question. So who feels this about their pricing? Like, I got this, I understand, I'm very comfortable with my pricing. I'm sure I'm pricing it correctly. I understand all the whole things. Or who kind of feels like this about their pricing? Meaning, I think it's okay. I guess it's right. I'm not sure. Am I leaving money on the table? Am I, underpricing, overpricing? How do I know I'm pricing the right thing for my product or service? So most people kind of feel like this, I guess, and it could be, even if you feel very confident about your pricing, there could be some tips and tricks in here to kind of think about all the things, because pricing is as much art and science. So there's very specific models and strategies to pricing. And then there's a little bit of kind of like, you got to test some stuff out. You got to try some things. You got to see what works a little bit. So it's not, I wish I could, at the end of this, I wish I could tell you, this is exactly what you need to charge for your product or service. It's not going to be that way. Like anything in business, it's going to be kind of a mix of knowing the structures and then kind of how applying those to your business. So as I said, there's no magic formula. No one feels 100% like they ever get it right. And there's many, many different models and strategies for pricing. So, I mean, I can come up with probably 20 different pricing strategies and models. We're going to cover kind of the most common ones today. And you can mix and match the models. You can do one type of pricing model for one type of product and then another pricing model for a different type of product or service. Like you don't have to do the same one, which also makes it confusing, but gives you flexibility depending on what your goals are. And then kind of being clear about why you would use one model versus another and what the strategies are behind using those. The key thing about pricing is that we want to make sure we get the best price for our products or services. You need to make money as a business, and you need to make sure that you're maximizing your profit margins. So that pricing structure is important to say, are you getting the most profit? And it's not profit to be greedy or you're trying to, get every little penny from your customers, but you have a valuable product or service and you need to be rewarded with that. If I'm giving you value to the customer, then pricing is how we determine value back to us. So that's how that exchange of money for goods and services is how our economy works. So you want to make sure that your value for your product or services is being recognized in that price, and that your customers, by paying that price, recognize that value as well. And that's just how our world works. The key things about pricing is that you want to be very clear about what you want to achieve with your pricing. You need to, like I said, if you do a strategy or you pick one of the models, then it's like, okay, I'm doing it for this reason. I'm not just trying to, like, I don't know, I'll just throw a price out there and we'll just see what happens. That's one way, a lot of way people do it. But you want to make sure, like, well, if I do this with my pricing, here's what I'm trying to achieve. Or if I do this with my pricing, I'm doing it for a specific reason to gain something else. So there's different ways you can use the models and strategies but they need to have a very clear purpose. And you need to be very clear about your product and service positioning, so that marketing, the messaging, all the other things that need to go along with pricing. Pricing is a component of the overall, and you need to make sure that everything is in line so that your customer sees the value and sees that that product or service is worth that price, or worth that value they're going to get is worth the price they're going to, that cash, that money they're going to give you. So you can't have a product that's positioned as a luxury product And then your website looks like it's from 1980, like it's all janky and like, or your customer service is substandard. Because if they're going to pay a premium, they expect everything around that product, that service to be premium in line with that pricing. So sometimes there's a mismatch there. And so you want to make sure that that's like, and all your marketing and messaging and how you talk about the product and service needs to reflect that pricing is part of the overall strategy for your business. And then whatever pricing you decide, be confident about it. I don't know how many times I talk to people or I see things and they'll put out a price. And then before the customer can even say anything, they start backpedaling. It's like, oh, but we can do this and we can take this off and we can discount that. Like, whoa. Like whatever price you set, you need to be confident that your service, that your product or service is worth that price. It's worth that value. You're not overcharging, you're not undercharging, that you're like, I stand behind that because that's what it is worth in the market. I've done my research. I've looked at we'll talk about all those kind of things the things that factor into so you can establish the right price. But whatever price you deliver, you need to be confident about that price and not sabotage yourself because if you don't believe in it, the customer isn't going to believe in it. They're going to go, well, wait, if you don't think it's worth that, then I'm sure it's not worth that, right? Or if you start kind of like, well, but we could immediately start backpedaling off the price, then they're going to think, oh, you're just overcharging and you don't believe that you're worth that price. So be very confident, whatever price you give or decide it is, that's what it is. Again, you can always adjust in the future, but you need to have a solid reason foundation and then a belief that that price is worth it, because customers will sense when you don't believe it and they won't pay it. So here's like 4 strategies. We're going to kind of cover these in this first kind of section. And then I think we'll take a break after this, but the factors to consider about in pricing. So there's a lot of things to think about to how to build the right price. And then there's the models that say, okay, here's the ways you can structure that price in the market. So first of all, you need to know your customer, you need to know your costs, you need to know your revenue or really your profit margin. So you have a revenue target, but then that revenue, we'll talk about that, but you really need to understand how that revenue leads into what's your profit margin for that. And then you need to know your competition. Those 4 areas kind of all work together to kind of build what price should you set for your products or services. And these are universal, whether I'm selling a product or a service or both. These are the things you have to factor in. And it's going to be different cost structure, different customer, maybe a different profit margin for a product versus a service. You still kind of need to build this out for both of those, either a product or a service. So market research, we have a great workshop that Cal does about market research 101. So if you need help in that area, I would look at that. I don't know when he's offering it next, but he usually offers it every quarter or so, every couple of months. But just knowing your customers. So if you don't know, again, with anything in your business and anything with marketing, we always talk in anything in developing new products or services, you need to know who your customer is. And it may be different ones for products and different ones for your service. You could sell the same products to different customers. You could sell the same service to different types of customers. So you need to understand who's that ideal customer for each product or service that you're offering. And these can be things where you may already have an existing business. You can talk to your existing customers. They're going to be great about giving you information about why did you buy this product or service, and who did you look at before? What are the things you considered? How did you solve it before? So doing those kind of informal surveys, or even if it's, or even like you call up look at your list and see what's my top 10 customers and just call them on the phone and talk to them. Like, hey, I just need 5 minutes of your time. I want to ask you some quick questions about our product service. We're trying to improve it to make it better for you, whatever it is, and trying to get some information about why did they buy your product or service? What options were out there? What did they value about that product or service? And then what's next? Like, they're going to give you keys on like, hey, what's the next thing I should offer? What would make this better for you in what I offer? It can be also things you can talk about to potential customers. So if you don't have any customers yet and you have but you kind of know in your mind, well, I'm targeting this type of customer, then you need to go talk to them. You need to talk to them about what they value, what's the solution your product or service is offering, and do they value that? How much do they value that? What do they do now to try to solve this problem? And all those kind of things will build into your strategy. There's also things like I think every industry has some kind of a trade association. So, I mean, plumbers have a trade association, pipe fitters have a trade association, business coaches have a trade association. And a lot of times those associations will have reports about pricing. It may be general across the country, but a lot of times they'll have like information, or there'll be articles in their journals. They'll have podcasts or art or blog posts about pricing. So you can kind of start getting a feel for if you're in a certain industry or you sell to a customer in a certain industry, kind of what they expect in pricing. It's amazing. We can kind of find out there. And they'll survey their members of like say you're selling to business coaches. They'll survey their members and say, you know, what do you expect to pay for this? Or what's the average pricing you charge for this? So, you know, so kind of thinking about from a customer and even from other professionals in your that are like you, because they anonymize that data. So it's not any one person giving information, but you can kind of see an aggregate. And it's averages, but it gives you an idea of kind of where either customers or your target customer is willing to kind of pay, or you as other professionals are willing to, are kind of charging. I think, oh, Yolanda, you had your hand up.
Oh, thank you. I didn't want to interrupt your flow there.
You can interrupt me. It's all
But
good.
I was taking notes and I was thinking, I wonder if this PowerPoint is going to be available.
Oh, yes. I'm so sorry. I should have said that. So the PowerPoint is very text heavy because we share it after. Alicia will send it out, or somebody, Michelle will send it out from SCORE. So you don't have to write all the notes. Sorry, I should have said that. And it's text heavy because like I hate like presentations, and then later on you get the slides and it's like one word on the slide and you're like, I don't even know what that means. Like, I don't get it. So I want you to be able to go back and go, oh, here's the things we talked about as like all the things. So you can kind of remember, not have to write down every line item. Good question. And then I think there was something in the chat. Let me see if there was.
Hey, Miss Sandy, it was me in the chat
Okay.
so everyone's in right now, letting the ones that were not panelists know that I was going to change them to panelists. However, they both declined, but I did turn on the microphone, so they should be able to speak if they want. I hope you have a very, very good workshop and good luck today.
Thank you, Alicia. So the panelist just lets you turn on your computers or your video, but that's fine. You don't have to turn on your video. But as long as you can, because it's just going to be me, Alicia doesn't need to stay for the 3 hours. I can't always see the chat. Sometimes it pops up. But if you raise your hand like Yolanda just did, I can see that on the side. But please, at any time, unmute and interrupt me. I have no problem with that because I can get on a roll. I understand that about myself. His pricing is so exciting, right? And so, you know, so you're like, feel free to interrupt me or just like raise a hand, or I can't promise I'm always going to see in the chat, but it pops up sometimes, but then if I'm in the middle of something, it hides again. And then I forget it was something in the chat. So, oh, the other thing might be, I just want to cover like thought leaders. So a lot of times thought leaders in industry or your target customer base would also have like, you know, they publish articles about pricing and pricing strategies and how, you know, for their specific industry. Oh, let me go back to the other thing about pricing is you have to know what your customer values. And I've seen this too many times where you develop a product or service and you as the creator think it's great, but there's a mismatch with what the customer values. And I've developed many products with engineers and I love engineers, but they tend to over engineer things. And so when I would go out and talk to customers, I'm like, you know, yes, that's a great feature, but they're not willing, the customer isn't willing to pay for it. They don't see that same value that the engineer did. So that's where you have to make sure that that customer, you have to understand what the customer values. Because they'll pay for what they value, but if they don't value it, even if it's free, they won't want it. Like, there's things that I know, like, okay, that can be free. I still don't care. I still don't, that's not valuable to me. But there are things where like, I will pay for that because I really value, I know that that's gonna, what that benefit is gonna be to me. So you have to understand pricing is also gonna be really based on what your customer values, and you want to make sure that your product or service aligns with what that customer values, and then so your pricing aligns with that as well. And then you have to know what problem you're solving for the customer. Too many times I've seen this as well, where you can develop a really cool product or service and you think it's like, it's going to be great. And then, but it really, like, how is it benefiting or helping the customer isn't clear either. And it might be there, but then the messaging is not there. So the customer doesn't understand, like, how is this going to help me? And if there's any confusion or they don't understand how the clear benefit or solution or problem that you're solving for them, they're not going to pay for it. Doesn't matter, again, what is, and you might have it, you just aren't clearly messaging or marketing that or talking about that in ways that your customer understands. So that's clear. Again, knowing your customer means you're going to know how you're going to present, market, message that product or service. So then they understand the corresponding price, that value goes along with that price, and they're willing to, they understand, oh, I'm going to get this benefit. This is of this value to me. And then your pricing is in line with that. Again, I mean, think about you as a buying anything. So when you evaluate something, whether you're conscious about it or not, you're evaluating it. And I would love to think that everybody just buys our products and services because they just like us. They don't. They buy because it's always the what's in it for me. I think it's WIIFM, what's in it for me. Everyone thinks that way. When you are a consumer buying something, whether it's $10 or $10,000, you're always going to evaluate, okay, what's that benefit to me if I purchase this product or service? And then is that valuable to me? What's it worth? And is that pricing in line with that? So they have to feel like they're getting their money's worth at whatever level it is. You're going to have to say, okay, the customer has to understand that that value is worth it for that price. And when you do these market research, and I say you should always be doing market research, it's a constant, it's never a one and done. You could do it a little heavier, but you'd always be talking to potential customers. You should always be going out to events and things where you might meet your potential customers. You should always be asking them and talking to them, and wherever they're getting their information, you know, being out there and engaging with your potential customers and existing customers. But when you talk to them about your products or service, and you're kind of finding out this value equation, you know, we don't ever just want to say, hey, will you buy my product or service? Because it's, as humans, we're taught to be nice and we're taught to be polite. And if somebody comes up to you and says, hey, will you buy my product or service? Sure, I will. Like they're not going to tell you, I mean, very rarely will they just say no, like that, because that we're a polite and we have rules of society and we want to be nice, and it doesn't cost me anything to say sure. Or you might just, you know, some people say, well, no, I don't really see it's for me, and that's, you know, they'll laugh. But a lot of times it'll be hard to, if you just ask, will you buy my product or service, you might get a lot of false positives where people are saying yes, because as a society we don't like to say, you know, no to people. But if you do that, then you would always need to kind of follow with, well, would you pay X? Or what do you think this is worth? You need to ask some kind of pricing question without saying, hey, it's $10, will you buy it today? You know, you have to say, well, what do you think this would be worth? Or what other solutions have you tried? And what was the cost? What was the price you paid for that solution? And people will do a lot of different options out there to try to solve a problem, and you can start getting, well, they usually pay, here's the other things they've tried, and the price for those things range from X to X. And so you can kind of start gauging, because they're going to start comparing your product to whatever solution, even if it's a bad solution that they have today. They're going to say, well, I pay X and it kind of solves it. So how much more would I pay to really solve it? So that's going to be kind of out there in their minds. So you always want to follow up with kind of, would you pay, you know, or what do you think the value of this is, or how much do you think this would cost? And, you know, kind of follow up with a little bit of a pricing question, instead of just kind of a, hey, will you buy my stuff kind of question. The other thing is costs. And it's harder, products is a little easier to cost out. Services are a little harder sometimes because there's a lot of intangibles in services. It's not as much for products. You have a specific ingredients, components, raw materials going into that product. You have a labor cost on top, and you kind of usually can get a somewhat solid cost structure for that product per unit price, say. A little harder for services, but we're going to talk about, there's probably things that you're not considering even in products and in services. So this again applies to both products and services. You're going to have direct and indirect costs. They'll be a little bit different for products and services. So it's again easier to figure out a direct cost for my cookie business. I know how much sugar is in each cookie or how many to make a dozen. I know, flour. I know how many chips, and I know, that I can figure out those ingredient costs into the product. But they're also indirect, and then there's indirect costs like, what's your marketing expenses? What do you have any sales or advertising? Do you, are there any trainings that you have to take? So there's kind of indirect that aren't directly tied. So a direct cost is tied to making that product or service. And indirect costs are things that kind of go around that you need to, that are around and kind of attached to that product or service, but they're not a one-to-one. Like I use this type of graphic design software to make this brochure. I'm a graphic designer. So that's, that direct cost can be the software I need to make the product or the service that I produce. Variable and fixed costs. Again, those are also two things that you need to think about mostly with products. So a product of a variable cost, there's fixed costs in services a little bit too, but a variable cost is so every widget I make has a certain amount of like raw materials in it. But if I make more widgets, then these costs increase. So if I'm going to use your cookie example. So if I make, 4 dozen cookies, I have X amount of raw material going into that. But if I make 12 dozen cookies, I just varied my cost because all my raw material costs just increased. It's still into the cookie, but my overall, that raw material is going to vary for every widget I make. The more I make, the more I spend in raw material costs. So those it varies with the how many units are produced. Fixed cost is and that can be in a product or a service. Fixed cost is, it doesn't matter if I make 1 unit or 10,000 units, I have a fixed cost. Like insurance can be a fixed cost. Any kind of, if you had to lease a space, that's a fixed cost. I can make 0 cookies down the line and I still have to pay my lease, or I make 10,000 cookies and I still pay my lease. So those are fixed costs with the business. Sometimes like utilities could be a variable cost. So if I'm spending more hours making something, I will have more electricity costs associated with that. So those are kind of things that vary versus fixed. So you have to make sure that you're capturing those costs into, as you scale up or produce more, those kind of costs will increase. Of course, hopefully you can offset that with some bulk, by buying things in bulk maybe that you couldn't before, or getting some price breaks, but those things are going to increase together. Or you're always going to spend every month, whether you sell one widget or help one customer or produce one service, you're still going to have some things like, there's some fixed costs like insurance and taxes and all those things that you're going to spend no matter what, if you sell a product or service or not. In those costs are also materials costs. So again, that's the cost of providing that good or service. Labor, and we're going to come back to this one a little bit because this is a sneaky one for services that you guys most people tend to miss. Labor for making a specific widget, a little easier to factor in, usually have a labor cost associated with like the time to make each widget. But then overhead's another thing too. A lot of times, so you factor in your costs and then you got to start adding these things on top of your cost to produce the good or service. What about taxes? What about insurance? What about office supply? You know, all these things kind of people tend to not sometimes miss in their cost structure. Or they think it's, oh, I'm sure it's like this, and they're underestimating what the cost of some of those other kind of things outside of delivering the specific product or service. The one thing I want to talk about service and labor is that service-based industries, especially if you're doing the work as kind of a solopreneur or a small business, you're sometimes doing a lot of different jobs in the business that aren't tied to delivering the service. You might be the business consultant, or you might be the home organizer going in and doing, you know, the service. But then you forget that you're also doing the marketing, you're doing the sales, maybe you're doing the bookkeeping and doing that, you know, maybe you're doing the, you know, the follow-up and the scheduling. So there's those other kind of jobs around delivering the actual service. And the problem is that those usually aren't getting captured. So what happens is that as the owner or the kind of the person providing the service, you just kind of all those other jobs get lumped in. But if you had to outsource those at some point, you should want to outsource those because you want to focus on what's the most valuable for your time. And usually it's actually providing the service. But if you have to outsource to a CPA to do your bookkeeping, well, if you haven't factored that cost, even though you're doing it yourself, if you haven't captured that cost of like, well, if I outsource it someday, if I'm doing it now and I'm not charging for that in my price, then when I outsource it, all I'm doing is hitting my own margin because I've set the price and I can't just say, oh, now that I have to hire a CPA, I have to increase my price to cover that because you weren't factoring in that job. So think about that as an owner or the doer, that all the other things that you do, you need to make sure that you're putting that into your price now so you can outsource those in the future. If not, you should still be paid for those jobs because those are being done. And you would just incorporate them as part of the business into the business, but you need to be able to outsource those at some point. And then you also need to think about a lot of times small business owners look at profit. So you need to pay yourself as the owner of the business. If you're doing work in the business, you need to pay yourself a salary as the owner. Again, a lot of times owners just take a part of the profit, but they forget that that profit is the profit for the business, and that you still need to pay yourself as the owner a salary. So that needs to be factored into your cost structure. Is you need a payment for yourself outside of just taking part of the profit of the business. So again, it's something to think about going forward in your cost structure, especially for services. They tend to kind of roll it all into one and then forget about all the other things because you can't work 100% on just providing the service. Whatever that other percentage is, maybe it's, 80-20, I don't know what it is, but if it's 80 doing the service and 20% doing all the other things, you got to count for that 20% time into that cost structure. And then there's a whole bunch of other things. I mean, depending on your product or service, there's things that you need to think about outside of just, it's packaging, it's shipping, it's going to trade shows, it's training that you take to keep up your skills, it's merchandising, it's marketing. And even if you don't have a specific number, at least put a percentage or something in. Say it's 5% for marketing or it's X percent. You can, and then start tracking those expenses and kind of seeing where they go. But you need to build something into your cost structure on top of physically delivering the goods or services. You need to add these other kind of things on top to make sure you're capturing the full costs into that product and not just thinking, oh, well, I make one cookie and it costs X. No, it's one cookie. It's the storefront that you have and the lease or it's shipping the cookies out or it's delivery or whatever, it's things on, or it's the marketing, it's the, sales, it's promotions on top of that product. Again, all that factors into your total cost to know where your pricing needs to be. The other thing is to know your profit margin. You probably all have a revenue target, which you should have a revenue target for your business of where you want to grow. And that's your top line number. That's great. But then you need to, like, all those costs that we just talked about come in. So you need to understand there's gross profit and then there's net profit. And we actually have a, don't remember the name of the workshop, but it's kind of like Finance 101, but it's about like understanding business, your P&L, your profit and loss statement. It's understanding your financials, and you really need to know your financials as a business owner to understand where everything is, what's costing, you know, how's it all work together, and what your true profit is. Because sometimes you can look at the revenue number and think, I'm making 10,000 a month. I'm great. But then you don't realize you haven't factored in that true cost, and all the costs and everything adds up to $11,000. Well, that wouldn't be great, because now you're not making any money, or your costs come up right underneath your margin, and then your profit margin is like 5% or something, like really low, and you don't realize, you think you're making money, but you're not realizing that your profit is all being eaten up because you haven't factored in the full cost structure into your pricing. So you want to make sure that you know what your industry expects for profit. So, you know, products, the margin for different type of products will be different. Sometimes a profit margin for a product could be 20%. Sometimes it's 50%. You know, it can range. Sometimes for services, usually the profit margin is a little higher. You know, it could be 70% in a service. So you really need to understand what's standard kind of for your industry. And that's where those trade associations can really kind of help you with, you know, understanding in general, business coaches have this type of profit margin. And then you can kind of go, okay, I need to, you know, at least you give you a target of where it should be and where you are now and where you need to grow to get it to, or maybe you're above, and that would be great. The other thing with profit is, because profit is your cash, profit is your investments back into your business. Profit isn't just about getting greedy. It's about how you can make sure that you can reinvest, and how you can upgrade your equipment, and how you can, you know, all that profit is to go back in and pay your employees, give raises, all that stuff you need to have built into that profit margin. You want to make sure you're covering all the costs. And then you will evaluate. You can also have different profit margins by different categories or segments, or even target markets. So if I'm selling to a B2B or business to business, my profit margin might be very different than when I'm selling to a consumer. Again, those are just two different types of customers. They have two different types of profit. And then, or you might sell wholesale and retail. So that's the other thing, is like, I'm selling to wholesale, my profit is going to be different, and there's a reason for that. And then if I'm selling retail, I may make a higher profit because there's costs I'm having to capture, and I'm not, you know, that I'm assuming by selling to retail that I wouldn't have in a wholesale. So I need a higher profit margin to cover those extra costs. So, and then you might even, in some industries also have historically, like some industries just have certain profit margins that are just kind of set. So I think of like restaurants, you know, restaurants really suffered during COVID because restaurants in general, for as much as we think food prices are high, or they've increased, restaurants' margins are razor thin. Like they're in the single digits, and they are happy. Like they are all about volume, and they're very, very low margins. No one in the restaurant business is getting fat and happy on the margins. But they need to turn. They need a high volume. They need throughput to offset that really low margin. Grocery stores, as much as we complain about the price of things in grocery stores too, very, very thin margins. They are all about high volume, but very low margins. So they're about turning products on the shelves, how quickly things sell. And that's why they may not stock everything, because they need to stock the top things that sell. It's hard for them to take a risk on something they're not sure about, because they need to turn that inventory because their margins are so low. So again, there's different industries have different margin expectations. That's just the way that industry works. So think about that. So you could have different products, different pricing or margins. And I would have different products sometimes, and I sold to different customers and they would be different profit margins, or I would, there's all different ways, again, when we go into the models about why you're doing it, but again, you're clear and you understand why I'm pricing it to this customer and why I'm pricing it to this customer and why I'm willing to accept this profit margin and why I'm willing to accept maybe a lower profit margin in this one. You do it with a reason. You don't just do it because you don't know, or it's like, or you kind of don't have a plan for why or what you're getting. If you're giving up a little bit of margin and giving up a little bit of price, what am I getting for that? And are you getting that trade-off? I would say too that I would say it's at least every year, probably should be more often than that, but at least every year, maybe every 6 months, you should look at your customers and the profitability for each customer that you serve, whether it's, or your products. So I should go through your product, like every year you need to go through your product line and say, what are my true costs? Have costs increased? Have things adjusted I haven't captured? And is that product still profitable? Or is that service still profitable? Do I need to adjust things? Is that customer still profitable? Sometimes customers, you don't realize, especially in services, they can be so, I won't say taxing, but they can be so, they can take a lot of time. It can be high maintenance customers where you don't realize how much time you're spending with that customer, and you're spending so much time with them, they're not even profitable anymore. Like you're losing money on a customer because the time they take wasn't built in, and it's just so much more excessive than others. So it's no longer a profitable customer or a profitable product or service. With products, usually if you start seeing profit dropping or it's not profitable anymore, then that's when you launch a new and improved kind of product, or you offer something different, and you need to kill and cull out the ones that are not profitable anymore or aren't selling. Same with services. You may offer a service for a while and it's kind of like, it's not really or people are kind of not seeing that value. It's kind of dropping, or you're having to drop price and you kind of see the profit going away. Then that's the trigger. I need to offer a kind of a revamped service that gets my price back up to where the customers value. And customers may change, they may value certain things, and then something else comes in, they start valuing something different, or you may have done something for one customer for a while and you need to kind of like step up to another level or offer them something different so they keep coming back to you. But again, you need to fire those, I say fire, meaning there's ways you can fire customers that are no longer profitable, because a customer or product or service that you offer, if it's not profitable anymore, you need to get rid of it, revamp it, retire it, offer something new, whatever it is, because that's just costing you time and money. So it's draining resources and it's draining your profit, and you cannot operate a business with that kind of loss essentially for your business. So it's tough. We can talk about ways to gently fire customers, or ways you can do that, or products and services. A little easier products, you can just always like, hey, people discontinue products all the time and offer something new. Services a little trickier sometimes, but we can cover that if you want to. The other one is I think the last kind of big one is to know your competition. So I don't say know your competition because you're going to copy them, but you need to know what's out there in the market, because I can guarantee you your customer is out there looking at what other solutions are out there. They're looking at what else is in the market. They're comparing you or your product or service with other things that other solutions that they could purchase. May not be the best solution, but they're going to still compare with what's out there in the market. I think there's a stat, I wish I could remember where it came from, but like 80% of your customers have done research before they ever talk to you, before they ever come into your store, before they ever approach you. They've already done research, especially, and again, the higher price point, the more they've done their research. If it's something that's $5, I'm going into Walmart and I'm buying a notebook. I don't know. I'm going to, I'm not really doing a lot, but I'm looking when I get there to see the different kinds, and I'm still comparing in the store, but I may not run to, 20 stores. But again, the higher price point or the more different options that they have out there, they're going to kind of research to see what's out there. Again, it may not be exactly the same as yours. You have your unique positioning, your value proposition, why you're different than the competition. You should know that. But there are still other options out there for them. And they're going to look at those, even if they're not quite right, they're going to still use those as a comparison or a kind of a check against what your product or service is offering. That competitor price point is initial gauge. Again, you're not copying them. You may offer different, upscale ingredients. You may offer different types of services. You may offer more customer service or more personalization, customization, whatever it is. So it may not be exactly one-to-one, but you'll at least know what's out there to use as kind of a gauge. So you can say, well, if similar solutions or competitors in the market are $50, I'm not making up numbers, $50 to purchase, and I'm charging $150, then it's like, whoa, your customers can go, that's a big difference. I better be able to, and it may be worth $150, but then you need to really make sure that your messaging and marketing clearly states out the value proposition and why you're worth 150 versus what's out there at 50. Doesn't mean people aren't going to buy, but they're going to go, I need to see why this one's 50 that looks like it does it to your 150, and what value and what am I getting for that? And be very clear on that. So again, it lets you know if you're really out of step with competition, or if you really can't see the differences. If I was a customer evaluating it, we'll talk about doing a product matrix, a comparison, but you kind of lay those competitive ones out there, and you kind of see where does your product or service kind of fall in with what other things are out there in the market. Well, I will say, especially for products, when you look at competitors, sometimes you'll see list prices and not net pricing. So you always want to, so list pricing is, it's the, when you go to a car dealership and they say the MSRP, that's the manufacturer suggested retail price. That's a list price. That's an inflated price out there that nobody ever pays. And there's a pricing strategy for why they do that. We'll talk about that at the end. But that list price, no one pays that. What's the actual net or the actual real price, if you can get it, of what somebody pays? A lot of times you'll see, coaching programs, and they'll offer X amount, for 6 months of coaching or something like that. But then they always have this kind of discounted price, but they're discounted prices forever. Like no one ever pays. They see that, or you see a lot of software companies, you'll go online, you'll see their pricing for like the different types of products they offer, and they'll have a price, and then they'll have a line through it saying, but your price is this, like we're giving you a deal. So there's a list, and then there's the real price that people pay. So if you can possibly get, especially with some products and some services, it may be a little harder on services sometimes, but usually with products, you can kind of see. Amazon's really bad at, or famous for this too, where that you have a list price, and then they have, but your price today is X, and your price today is the same no matter what day it is, so that's the real price people are paying. So get the net price if you think there's kind of a list price or an inflated price. And then you always want to make sure, so we're going to talk about doing a product matrix where you kind of a competitive matrix, and you always want to say, there may be things that you offer additional value, points of differentiation. You want to make sure that, hey, if the competitors offer these 3 things, but then you offer these 5 things, these extra ones, what's the value of those? So you may be able to charge more than the competition, but you have to understand, are those extra things you're offering valued by the consumer or customer, and then how much? Again, that goes into that market research and talking to potential customers and what they value. But then, so don't be afraid of that you can't charge a higher price than the competition. You just have to understand, if you are, why you are, is it valuable? And then how do you market that and message that so your target customer knows that extra value and what it's worth. So we want to do a product comparison. So even if you're a service-based business or a product business, we would do these all the time, where we'd actually do, like, literally we just took a spreadsheet. It's simple. You just list like features, benefits. Down one side, you list like the competition across the other side. You list like the price points of each, and then you kind of just start listing the things, and you can go to their websites. They usually always have some kind of a feature benefit bullet section for kind of each package or each type of product, and then start building that out as a spreadsheet, so you can kind of see across landscape about where your product sits with the comparison, the competition out there in the market. Because again, your customers are doing it, so you need to be aware of what's out there, and then how you position yourself both from a messaging standpoint and a pricing standpoint with what's out there in the market. And then you also want to talk to customers. So, you can talk to them about why they buy your product versus a competition. What other products did they look at? You probably as a business owner know who your competition is. So you kind of can see, hey, what do they have out there? How do they talk about their products and services? What kind of language do they use? You can kind of start getting a feel for how they're positioning their products and services versus how you're doing that. Again, all that consumers are looking at. And so that will give you kind of help you get all these things kind of build into that pricing strategy of how you're positioning it, how you're messaging that. So what value do the customers understand that you provide to then support that pricing structure that you're going to end up with. All right, so that's the kind of first break. I don't even know where we are in time. Oh, we're about right at an hour. So is there questions about any of that? We're gonna go into actually like the next section is like specific pricing models and like, here's this one, like to know which way you'd want to price things and like strategies, but that's kind of the general one that applies to both products and services. And oh, please come off mute or raise your hand. I don't see anything in the chat. All right. I don't see hear any questions. So if you want to, we can take like a 5-minute break. I'm willing just to stay here and keep talking about pricing because it's so exciting. I know. But you guys want to take a 5-minute break? Oh, Yolanda, I see you.
I didn't mean to do that. I was gonna say, yes, let's take a 5-minute break. Sorry.
Okay, so raise your hand for the 5-minute break. Okay, got it.
Sorry.
No, it's all good. So let's go like 10:05. Does that work for everybody? About 5 minutes. Just come on back. But I'm just gonna hang out here. And you'll have to let me know when you're back because you don't have your cameras on, so I can't see when you're back or if you're gone. So
I'm back.
Thank you. I was gonna say about 5 after, so if you could either like come off mute, let me know, or raise your hand, let me know that you're back. Either one's fine.
I'm back, Danielle.
Perfect. I don't know if Scott, if you can, like, just let me know. I don't, maybe you can't come off mute or put in the chat, or just raise your hand and let me know if you're back. Maybe not. Give another minute. Danielle, do you have a physical store now, or is it like out of your home, or how's your business work?
I have everything in place. I just got my license from the state of Michigan, so I'll be working out of a rental kitchen.
Okay,
That'll be written weekly.
okay, good. So you'll have, so that sometimes if people are doing things out, kind of starting out of their home, they don't factor in sometimes in their costs, like if I have to rent a space or, that, so you need to kind of build that into your cost now, even though you think I'm out of my home or something, I don't have to cover that, but, or insurance and that kind of stuff for the space. So excellent.
Yeah.
And then we're going to talk a little bit about wholesale versus retail. So that might be something that you think about for your
Yes.
business.
Yes, I definitely need that conversation.
Yeah. And then Yolanda, the same for you, like you're offering a service, but I don't know if your products are like where you're kind of purchasing and just kind of doing like an affiliate program, or you actually purchasing and selling, or are you creating your own products to sell?
I would be purchasing, my business is not up and running yet, but the service part is easy. It's just that I think that, well, I shouldn't say it's easy. I would be buying products, but it's just not gonna, I don't have one place. It could be, that's my problem, is I don't have it all in one place. Because right now, it's not like I'm going only to the Container Store or only to Home
Mhm.
Goods or Target. That's where I need to get
Yeah.
more. Yeah, it needs to be Amazon or something and be uniform or something else. I don't know.
Well, and for you, wherever you decide to get your products from, is look and see if they have some kind of affiliate program. So it's where you don't have to stock inventory, or like you can give a link to your customers, they go purchase, you get, and it's a way to kind of get into products without taking on the full cost burden of offering a product. So they might offer, and they'll just give you like a percentage. But it doesn't cost the consumer, your customer anymore. They still pay the same price. But then that affiliate program, that they use a link or a code or something, and then that retailer knows, and Amazon does it. I'm sure some of the big like Container Store and those might do it as well. And it may be an online thing versus, at the in-store, but they can use that code, and then that signals the retailer that you were the referral essentially. And they give you, it's a small percentage, but they give you like a percent of that sale. So it could be 5%, it could be, they have different rates for different ones, but that's a way that, and it doesn't cost your customer anymore, but then you'll get, because they kind of, you think of you as like their marketing expense. So like a referral fee or marketing, so they kick you back that percentage that they would do to marketing back to you, because you're referring that customer to them, and you gave them that sale. So they're willing to give you a little bit, and you just have to be upfront with your customers, like, hey, I get a small percentage back. It doesn't cost you anything different, but that's a way that you can maybe do it from multiple stores, or like through Amazon or from other large retailers. They might have that kind of affiliate program.
So they wouldn't be telling, I would still be telling them, here's what you need. We need 10 of these and 4 of
Yes.
these. Okay.
Yeah, you would just either give them like a link, or say, here's the link to the products. Put this code in when you buy, and then it doesn't cost you any more, and you just have to be upfront, because it never costs you more. Affiliate program should never cost you anything. But then they get that, and then you get a little percentage on the backside for referring that customer, or it's, to that. But the customer's still getting the benefit of the product, and not paying anymore. And then they know you vetted it, you trust it. It's the right thing that they need And they
Yeah.
don't get confused about, like, there's 20 things on the site. I don't understand which one I need to
I
buy.
just don't know how to do that whole thing in terms of, and that's another topic I'm sure that I don't want to
Yeah.
take the time on, but how to even be a part of that affiliate type program.
If a retailer offers it, you just sign up for it.
Okay.
They'll have a link. Here's the form you
Oh.
fill out. You probably have to
Okay.
show that you're a real business, like some business information, tax ID, whatever it is, your whatever that stuff is. But if they offer it, if they don't have a program, that means they don't offer anything like that. It doesn't mean you can't approach them and you start something with them. If you really believe in their product and they're kind of a small business, they may not have something like that formal. But any kind of retailer that's of any size is gonna, if they offer it, will have a program. You just sign up for it. They give you a code and you just go to town giving people that
Perfect.
code. Mhm.
Wow, I didn't even think about that. Thank you.
Yeah. And there's another home organizer in our SCORE Nashville network. And she's thinking about developing her own, because there's something that she thinks can help her customers, but she goes, I can't find it in the market. So she's taking something and like tweaking it and developing her own product to sell and would get it manufactured and that kind of stuff. So that's a different route too down the road. I start with affiliate first, and then, down the road, you could look at even developing your own products that if you can't find it in the market.
Perfect, thank you.
All right, let's get back to it. We're going to talk about some different pricing models. So we'll kind of go for the next hour or so, and then again, at any point, ask questions. Like I said, some of these will be product specific, some will be service specific, and some will cover both products and services can apply to both. So again, I would still recommend that you listen to the others, even if it's a service one, because like Danielle, at some point you may offer things, they're not true services, but like maybe it's cookie classes and people can come in and, do different things in your store that might be a little more service, not service, but they're not quite as tangible as a product. So there may be things in there that to think about pricing those things down the road. We're going to talk about cost plus pricing, market down, rate-based hourly. Again, that one that'll apply to services. Project-based, retainer, subscription, tiered. And then we're going to kind of cover some of the common mistakes that I see in pricing. And then about how you raise prices. Again, if you're just kind of starting out in business, you're like, wait, I'm not even worried about raising prices, but something to think about down the road, because at some point you will be raising your prices, hopefully, because you should never charge the same price. 5 years down the road, you better be at a higher price than you are today. And then about publishing pricing, and then just kind of some bonus tips, and that'll kind of wrap up our next section. So this is the most common one for products. So when you're thinking of a product, whether you're developing your own, or even when you're purchasing one, this is kind of how products are used. Usually, I will say it's not necessarily the best way, but it's the most common way that people price their products, is that they're going to have like a cost to deliver. They're going to figure out what that cost structure is, and they're just going to do a cost plus some profit that they want to make, some percentage, whether it's cost plus 25% or cost plus 50% or cost plus 70%. It's a cost plus model. So they're going to figure out all their costs and then just say, hey, I want to add on X amount of profit on top. That's very commonly done for products. There are some benefits to doing that. It's pretty straightforward. I mean, if and can be very easy and quick way to get pricing listed and get pricing out the door. It can be very consistent returns if your costs are stable. Now, what we saw through COVID, when we were doing pricing, costs were not stable. And even now, there's still some fluctuation on shipping costs, and some of the ingredient costs, the food costs might still be kind of high. They haven't returned back to kind of pre-COVID levels. So again, if your costs are pretty consistent and you do this cost plus, you can kind of chug along and you really don't, may not have to adjust your pricing much. I'd still say you need to check to make sure your costs are stable, but it can be a pretty consistent return. The downside of this is that it really doesn't take into account market conditions or perceived customer value. So if you do a cost plus, sometimes your customer might value that much more at a higher price. So I think of like the smartphones. If the smartphone companies all did cost plus 50%, your smartphone wouldn't be $800, $900. Let me just tell you that. So that they would be leaving a lot of money on the table because customers perceive the value of that device way more than what that cost of that device is. So that sometimes can, if you just kind of look at, oh, cost plus X%, you're not getting what the customers, the value of that in the market is. You're not looking at the market conditions. You're not taking into account costs and fluctuations because you're not looking at what the market is telling you, or what that value is. So you might be losing money by doing it that way. The one way I would do cost plus is if you need to kind of, and once you've kind of set the price, it's a little hard to adjust or increase that price if you've kind of set it wrong. So one way to kind of increase, if you've done a cost plus pricing structure, is to kind of bundle products together to raise the perceived value, so you can increase that cost or increase that price. So that's something, if you're kind of stuck in, you guys are kind of at the beginning of your journey, so you're not, some people I've talked to are kind of, they've gone down this path and now they're trying to get themselves out of it. And it's a little harder sometimes, but one way I would suggest is, and think about this too, as you're developing your products and services, is there are ways to bundle things together. We'll talk about, that's a way to kind of add value and increase price. Even if you can't increase on the individual things, putting them together gives a higher perceived value to the customer, and then a higher price point can be charged for those things. You'll see that a lot in products in retail. You know, it's the bundle of package together for a Father's Day sale, or they'll bundle things to try to get a higher price point. Individually, the items cost X, but all the three things together, that convenience factor and having it all together, and that kind of makes it look like it's a much better value for the customer. What I always recommend with products is a market down pricing. So, you look at what's out there in the market today. What are the comparable, what's the competition charging? What are other similar products charging? And you look at that kind of that retail price. Then you say, hey, I need to make, like, if I make this margin, what's my target cost? Like, if I want to make 50% margin, where would my cost need to be? And then you can kind of compare, where are my costs to that target? You know, you can kind of back into like, oh, wow, my costs are way higher. There's no way, because the market pricing is kind of here. Again, if you can't justify a premium price with what you're offering, you know, they're going to start looking at the market out there and say, okay, around this is what I normally pay for X. Then, and if they don't see the value of your product for a higher price, they're going to kind of think, well, it should be around X. And then if you're priced at X and you drop it down to like, but I want to make 50% margin, oh, my target costs need to be here, and my target costs are way higher, maybe they're lower, that'd be great. Then, you know, I'm not leaving money on the table because my costs are coming in under that. Or if your costs are coming in higher than that target, you know, I need to figure out where my costs are. Like, are there ways I can reduce my costs? Are there ways, am I missing something? Is there something I'm being, you know, am I paying too much for some kind of something in my cost structure? So again, it also identifies, it helps you keep that profit margin, because I will say in business, we always talk about cash is king, and profit is cash. Profit is cash coming into your business. And you can have great revenue numbers, gross revenue numbers, but if your profit numbers are tiny, you're going to struggle as a business. You can make all the money in the world at the top line, but your bottom line, that profit that drives down to what you're bringing in cash, is key. So making sure that you aren't squeezing your margin, or if you're losing margins, if you start seeing that target cost creep up, then you can start saying, why am I see my margins reducing, and I need to figure out what's going on here and adjust that. Either, again, adjust my pricing or adjust my cost structure to keep that same profit margin. It's great because market down, it tells you what the market conditions are. It tells you what's already out there that customers are looking at. It's kind of giving you that, what customers are finding today, what do they value, and how much is what they're paying for kind of in the current market. Again, you can always charge more than what's in the market, but you have to, again, message that, market that, tell customers why you're that higher price, and do customers value that. Again, going back to that, know your customer. You can be higher. Don't think you have to be the low price guy. You offer a lot of things as a small business: customization, personalization, high touch. There's things that intangibles that you can bring, but you need to make sure that you communicate those to your customers so they understand that's the value you're bringing, and you aren't just like what else is out there in the market. But you need to know they're going to use that market pricing, the competitor pricing, as that baseline to compare yours to. You know, if you're doing the market and then you back down to your target cost, you know, you're not leaving money on the table. So you know that, hey, if they're willing to pay this and I'm at my margin, like, you're good in your pricing. For services, it's a good thing to help kind of establish, again, this is mostly for products, but you can do this for services as well, kind of seeing what other similar coaches or service providers are kind of offering, and then what you get for that. And then you can kind of make sure, again, that you're not leaving money on the table, or maybe you can charge more. Like you see what's out there in the market today and you're thinking, oh, I thought my profit should be this, but oh, my profit can be a little bit bigger because my costs are lower and I'm getting more profit in. And again, it establishes that what's out there in the market, because your customers are looking for that. The problem is that, again, market down, you may have features or benefits and intangibles that you offer to your customers that it's hard to quantify. It's, you know, so you may actually have to, like, maybe it's your customer service after they buy your product, or maybe it's some personalization that you offer, things like that, it might be hard to, or your quick turnarounds, like you can order today and get your cookies within, you know, 24 hours. And maybe all the competitors are out there, you know, you have to order a week ahead before you need it, you know, so those kind of intangibles may be hard to build into that pricing structure. But again, you need to factor those in, like, and then communicate that, like, hey, it's a 24-hour turnaround. Most out there in the market are, you know, it's a 7-day turnaround or something. So those are things you can communicate and put in your marketing messaging to help justify your price position. But it's hard to quantify that on when customers are looking at, if you don't tell them those things, they don't see that, they're going to kind of go, why are your price higher? If they don't understand the value you bring for that higher price. The one thing I will say about market down or any kind of pricing is don't add any features in unless your customers are going to pay for it. And I would, especially with products, I have people want to add, and I guess it's mostly engineers, and you're not dealing with too many engineers, but sometimes you'll put things into a product. It could be ingredients. It could be, you know, it's a higher level of chocolate in your cookies. But if your customer doesn't value that, and I don't even know fancy chocolate, but, you know, something that level, then they won't pay for it. Or if you are going to offer that higher value, higher type or brand of chocolate, put that in put that in the description so the customers know, oh, I'm getting X type of chocolate, not just the regular chocolate off the shelves, you know, or something like that. So they have to understand that, and then they have to be willing to pay for it. Maybe your target customer's like, that's nice, but I can't tell the difference in that fancy chocolate, so I'm really not going to pay extra for it. That's why you need to know, you know, if you offer that extra feature or benefit or value, are they willing to pay for it? And then they have to believe that they're getting that value. So they have to understand that they're getting their money's worth, you know, and then you might have, like, that's where you might have like tiered products where you're like, maybe certain type of customer doesn't value that chocolate, but then there's like a special customer that wants the gold leaf on the top of the cookie, you know, or something. So then they'll pay extra for that gold on the cookie. But then there's some customers like, I ain't paying for gold on my cookie. I just want a cookie. So you have to kind of know that you have different products might have different price points and different customers that will pay for those different features or value out of those products. So let's talk a little bit, and Yolanda, probably not going to be applying to you so much, but it will be interesting to know how wholesale distribution channels versus retail works. But Danielle, this will be more applicable to you. But so there's different types of distribution channels, and even if you don't sell to all of them now, you need to think about how they work so you can set your pricing up to be able to sell into those channels later. It'll make sense here in a minute. So most small businesses start out direct to consumer. So you're selling your product directly to, like, through a website, through a farmer's market, through a show or an event or somewhere. You're selling directly to the consumer. It might be at a retail location. So you're gonna have your cost, and we're making up numbers here, but your cost plus your profit, whatever that is, and you get your consumer price. So say if your cost is $50, say you have a 50% profit, boom, that's your consumer price. So you're selling direct to consumer. Then you think, I'm getting it a little bit bigger, I'm scaling my business, I want to look at other distribution channels. So usually you look at going maybe to a retail. So maybe you do a thing, work with some small retail chain, and you want to sell your product to them. They're selling to the consumer. So now you've added a step in the distribution process. We call it like a 2-step, 3-step, like you're adding extra steps in between you and the end user or the consumer. So now that $50 cost is still the same. That $50, and you've already set the consumer price. So you've established out there what your cost is, and you've established what that consumer price should be, because you can't just all of a sudden jack it up because you got another step in the process. So you've established that consumer price. So now that 50% profit needs to be split between you and the retailer, because the retailer deserves some profit. The retailer has the customer coming in, they have the storefront, they do their own marketing. They should earn a profit because they're absorbing some of your costs. They're absorbing, and they have that connection with the customer that they've already built. So your 50% profit is now split between you and the retailer, which is actually very standard and normal. And retailers are going to tell you what profit they want. They're going to tell you, but you set the consumer price. So you can't now sell direct to consumer and then go to a retail and jack up and sell the same price to the retailer or cost. And then the retailer has to want to still make that same profit. Now the consumer price is jacked up, because now you're putting the retailer in a difficult position, because like people are going to find out, because they're going to go to your website, they're going to check out their product and go, oh, I can buy it cheaper straight off your website versus the retailer. So now you've just hurt the retailer's business, because you're like undercutting them by selling direct. So the consumer needs to know, if I go to a retail or I go to your own website store, that price I pay is the same, or else the retailers are not going to take your product. They're not going to stock it, because they're not going to make any money, because you're kind of theoretically undercutting them on your own site. So then that profit gets split between the retailer and you. And there's like a lot of things, on the back end. Retailers are generally, again, small shops might, one-off shops might have a different model, but most retailers should be in that 20 to 25% margin. They're going to want to take that much, because again, they have either their own salespeople, their own staff, their own marketing, the space on the floor of their retail shop, whatever it is that they're absorbing. And then again, they have that link to the consumer. So you're not having to do the marketing. You're not having to get that consumer. They have that already. So that's worth something. So now that profit gets split between the two. But wait, there's another channel. So now we've added in the wholesaler. So again, I want to scale and grow big. I want to sell like the wholesale. And especially in the food industry, there's a lot of like wholesalers and for a retailer, it's nice to go to a wholesaler, because they can get multiple things from that wholesaler. They can order all their supplies from one wholesaler versus a bunch of small, independent, smaller manufacturers, the same. So a lot of them will buy from a wholesaler. So now you just added another step in that distribution chain. So now you went from 2 steps, you're 1 step down the consumer. Now you're adding into 2 steps before you get to the consumer. So that same $50, that same 50%, because again, you've established the consumer price. You did that when you did direct to consumer. Again, you can't start charging more because you just added more links in the distribution chain. That consumer price is there. So that 50% profit now has to be split between the retailer, the wholesaler, and then you still earn a profit. And again, you're gonna make less, you're gonna have less profit on the wholesale. That's just normal. Wholesalers get a discount, because again, they're taking on additional costs. They're stocking your product, they're inventorying it, they're shipping it out, they're just, they're picking and packing. They're doing those kind of things as a retailer. Then they also have the relationships with the wholesalers have the relationships with the retailers. So they have sales teams that go out. They have marketing they do to retailers. They ship out to retailers. They do inventory, they do fulfillment. They earn their money, and they have that connection to the customer, to the retailer, to the consumer. You don't have to, they already have that. So you don't have to spend those marketing dollars. That shifts over to them. And the distribution, packaging, all that stuff. So now that 50%, just the retailer's still going to want their same profit. They're not going to go less because they got it from a wholesaler. They're going to say, I still want my 20 or whatever it is. The wholesaler is going to generally want about 20% of that margin, and then you're going to be left with 10%. So you will make less profit on wholesale, but theoretically, you should have more volume going through wholesale to make up the difference in that. And you're pushing some of your marketing sales expense off to the wholesaler, to the retailer, and that's why they earn their part of the profit. So you're not having to absorb those costs in, you're shifting those costs over to them. So that's why you need to think about, you may be direct to consumer now, but think about down the road. Again, if your margins aren't large enough to cover that in, as you start slicing those margins down, that margin, that profit, you need to make sure that you end up with some money at the end of the day. Like you still need to make a profit even selling to wholesale. And you need to have that pricing, so you understand where your consumer price is now to your cost structure to know what's that profit number and how will it get split as I separate out to more and more distribution channels.
I have a quick question if you don't
Mhm.
mind.
Yeah.
So if I was to market my product to grocery stores, I'm kind of new to all of this. I'm learning as I
Mhm.
go.
Yeah.
That'd be retail to customer, right? Because I'm selling to the grocery stores.
Correct.
Okay. All right. Just wanted to clarify. Thank you.
Yes, and I will say about grocery stores, it's going to be hard to sell to like a chain like a Kroger. They're
Mhm.
really going to buy through a wholesaler. They don't have as much local flexibility to buy local products. Something like a Whole Goods might, they have more dedicated resources to buy local, like, and they usually have kind of a section, or they have, they have some money carved out to buy from local, or local manufacturers. But that will be something that you have to think about. And then think too that, you still have to know what their, like they should give you in like a forecast to know if you can meet their quantities that they want, because they're
Okay.
going to want different volumes. And you just have to make sure you can deliver on and they'll have very specific times. I need it, this many a week or this many, kind of a thing to know if you can meet their demand.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
And they might also, nice thing about, I know something like Whole Foods, I said Whole Goods, Whole Foods, or some kind of a smaller, like, and maybe a smaller grocery stores or independent, ones that might be easier to get your products into. But they might also want you to do some marketing for them in the sense of, like, you come in and do those like taste test things, like, sometimes like they'll want like, you could meet the actual person that makes the product and you can talk about it and talk to customers that their customers that walk through. And, sometimes like Kroger hires people that do that, but sometimes, if you're local, maybe you could offer that as something that you could provide. It's like, hey, I can come into the store once a week and do a little taste demo station or something,
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Thank
And
you.
that gives you a connection to potential consumers too, and you can talk to them about what they like, what they don't like, and
Yeah.
about the product.
Yes. Great idea. Thank you.
Mhm. All right, that's that. So then we're going to kind of move on a little bit to a service one. And this will be a little more for Yolanda, but then even, kind of thinking about this, if there's services you can add on to a product-based business. But the most common kind of service one is a rate-based or hourly. I'm gonna show you another one I think might be something might have some benefits. This one has some limitations to it. But a lot of freelancers, coaches, consultants, even lawyers, will do a rate-based or hourly, it's a flat rate per hour. It's $100 per hour, or if you're a lawyer, it might be $500 per hour, but there's a specific dollar amount per hour of work. And then usually any kind of travel expenses, especially if you're like a coach, consultant, are charged separately from the actually kind of flat hour of doing the work. So the pros of this is that you get paid for every hour of work, technically. So you like, I did this, I spent this many hours, here's my bill, like pay me. Did you keep detailed records per client, because you'll have multiple clients. If you charge per hour, you need to know, like, I worked 2 hours for this client in a day, and then an hour here, and then 3 hours for this one, or whatever it is that you have to kind of keep track of what hours for what client. And then some industries this is a very accepted practice. We're going to talk about other options, but this sometimes, especially for like lawyers, this is so ingrained, it would be really hard for, some lawyers to change off of this, because it's so ingrained in their industry to charge an hourly fee. And lawyers are so like, they'll charge actually their time in 6-minute increments, because it's hard. They don't ever usually work a full hour for somebody, but they'll charge. But if you call them on the phone, we're going to charge you 6, there's a 6, how much long I was on the phone with you? It's that they'll charge it down to the minutes, and they usually charge like, they'll bill and like, and they have very detailed tracking, and they log every single thing they do to get it billed to that client. So those sometimes it's really hard for some industries to break out of this kind of hourly model, because it works for them. The difficulty with this is you're trading time for money. So it's going to limit your growth. If you say, I'm spending X number of hours per client, you only have so many hours in a day. You have only so many clients you can take on at that point. So really is going to kind of limit your growth potential. The other thing is that you only get paid for when you're actually doing work for the client. So you're not working 8 hours a day every single day, every day of the week. So you have to factor in like the times that you're working on marketing, or your social media, or your messaging, or you're building up a sales funnel, or you have a discovery call with a client that you're not getting paid for. Those are all things eating into that time. So, and you have to factor those other kind of activities in your hourly rate. So if you actually perform services 30 hours a week, then there's another 10 hours a week. If it's a 40-hour week, there's 10 hours a week of you're doing sales and marketing, and your bookkeeping, and your accounting, and it's your prospecting, and it's meeting with potential clients, but there's no money. Whatever that other time is, you have to still factor that time in and make sure you're capturing that in your hourly rate. So you need to not just bill for the 30 hours, but in that hourly rate, figure I've got 10 extra hours of that same time, that same rate, pulled into the rate I'm charging, that I'm actually doing the work, if that made sense. So you have to kind of factor in things that you're not directly doing for clients and still get paid for those hours in that work. Sometimes on these, clients can get really surprised when they get the hourly rate, because if you haven't talked about how many hours, or if you go over that, because some clients don't understand and they ask you for more things, you're like, sure, it's an hourly rate, I'll do those things. And then they thought the project was going to be 5 hours, and they turn around getting a bill for 15 hours because they kept asking for stuff. And you're like, sure, I'll just do it. I'll just tack it onto just keep racking up the hours. So they can sometimes go, whoa, I didn't realize it was that much difference. Like I didn't realize we were at 15 hours. And so that can be a little bit of a sticker shock for them. So you just have to really manage and communicate if you're going over the estimated hours, letting them know that, and then making sure they're good with that. The other problem with rate-based and hourly is that the faster and better you get, the more efficient you are, you're gonna get paid less, which doesn't make any sense to me, because if you can do your work faster, better, quicker, then that's because of your experience and skill set, and you're leveling up. Doesn't mean I should get paid now that something that took me 3 hours before I do it in 2. I shouldn't lose an hour because I made myself better. So I shouldn't get paid less because now I'm faster at it. Because some things when you first do it the first time takes longer, and then you do more of them, and you're like, okay, I've got to process a system. I've made improvements, but theoretically, I get paid less for that. Like, wait a minute, doesn't make sense. And then it also commoditizes your knowledge work. So what happens is that it doesn't really, again, as you level up your skills and get better and provide more value, it doesn't factor that expertise in. So it's like somebody that's starting out, we usually charge less per hour, and then you start increasing that over time, but it's really saying because I have 20 years of experience in something, it's hard to, how do I say that I'm really saving you a lot because I know I'm so experienced in this area that my 5 hours is going to be worth way more than somebody else's 5 hours because I know all the shortcuts, I know all the mistakes, I know all the pitfalls. I save all the time because I know those things and I can watch out for them and not get trapped in those. But you don't see that benefit because you just see me executing at a high level. So it kind of commoditizes and starts making people compare, well, you're $100 an hour, they're $75 an hour. Why are you more? I don't see the value. Like it starts making you kind of go down to that low. And there'll be people out there that will charge, crazy. You're like, how can they even charge that amount per hour? Again, they might just be starting out or they're, in a different situation where they can charge much less, but you're like, now your knowledge and value gets commoditized down to that lowest price factor of like, well, I can go get this for, $50 over here and you're charging me $100. Again, your messaging should explain why you're $100, but it's still, if that gap gets too big, it kind of commoditizes that knowledge and experience and expertise you bring that it's it's an intangible. So what I would suggest is for services to like look at being a project-based and quoting a kind of a flat fee for a project, as opposed to saying I'm charging you per hour. You're still going to, on the backside, you're still going to estimate the number of hours it's going to take for the project. You're still going to know, and you're still going to have an hourly fee on the backside, because that's going to help you set what the flat fee price is, but you aren't showing that to the customer. You may know to go in and organize this office is going to be, you look at this thing and you think, okay, it's going to be 10 hours of my time. Well, you're not saying I'm charging, and I'm making up numbers, Yolanda, so don't quote me, but you're not saying, oh, I'm $100 an hour, it's 10 hours, here's my quote. You're saying on the backside, it's about 10 hours of my time. I'm giving you, it's a $10,000 fee on the front end to the customer. You're not telling them the hourly rate on the backside and any other things that you build into that. Like it's all the other things built into that cost structure. You're just giving a project fee saying, okay, to do this project, here's my price. And really, in a lot of industries, a lot of people are fine with that. Like they accept, and it helps them too. I mean, from the customer perspective, they know what the price is. They're not going to be surprised, like, well, how many hours? And if I go over and I get charged more, they understand like, oh, great. And I can budget now. And I know this is going to be what my price is. Again, for you as the provider, if you can get, and again, if your value is this project should take 10 hours, but I can do it in 5, it's still worth the 10 hour. Like it's still worth that original time. You're not like, oh, now I'm only going to be able to charge 5 because I can get it done quick. But if I can because the value is still worth the 10 hours. So if I can do it faster, great, because of my skill set. I've done this so long. I know what I'm doing. I know all the shortcuts. I know how to make this very efficient and execute. So it incentivizes you if I can get something done quicker with the same high quality. And it's still that same value the customer is getting, that same fee is still the same value. Whether I can do it in 5 hours, it takes me 10, you're getting the same value, the same end result for that customer.
Yeah,
It also,
oh,
go
I'm
ahead.
sorry.
No.
I should have raised my hand. I apologize. I definitely would like to do this. I do see a lot of people charging by the hour and saying, oh, we're 75 an hour or whatever. And it took us 10 hours and they showed pictures of everything they did for this project. Definitely this is how I want to go. Of course, there's going to be times where I'm going to be under and times I might be over, and you just have to kind of balance that out. I guess that's what I'm looking at. Well, if I structure it this way, but a lot of people are structuring it the way I said earlier, just the hourly. I guess I'm just gonna do it the way I want to do it because I don't think it really matters. It looks different. It
Yeah.
just might not be, I think this is the better way to do it.
Yeah, I don't want to say hourly is not the right way to do anything, but
Right.
I always encourage people to shift over to this.
Okay.
Again, from the customer's perspective, they're gonna say, oh, well, a $75 an hour guy times 10 hours. And if your flat fee is in line with that, they're not gonna, they're gonna say, okay, you flat fee me versus the hourly, okay. And then you can talk to them in the call saying, hey, it's a flat fee. You know what's budgeted ahead of time. There's not surprises about what your end up bill is going to be, kind of a thing. Like you can say it's just a different way to package it, but it's the same. In their mind, they're gonna go 75 times 10 hours is X. Your flat fee is in line with that, then there won't be any issues on their part. And we're gonna talk a little bit about payments and how you get paid for that kind of flat fee or hourly. But yeah, it's such a shift, the way the invoice and the bill comes. It shouldn't be any different for your customer to accept.
Okay, thank you.
Again, and then I'd make sure that you, because of your experience or skill set, it might take somebody else 10 hours to do. And even if you can do it in less, that's just gonna be, you still, again, charge that same fee because they're getting the same deliverable. They're getting the same value and result, whichever way they decide to go, whichever hourly or project based. And then again, that helps you to offer, if you can do it faster, quicker, easier, cheaper, whatever, because you have other resources that you can pull in that the other guy doesn't have, will just benefit you. Here's the cons though, I will tell you, especially on that some things to keep thinking of is if you do the project based, you need to have like a specific project timeline, very key milestones. Like here's the deliverables, here's the time like overall time, like if something's gonna be done in 6 weeks, or it's gonna be done in a weekend, or it's gonna be, it's gonna be like a clear kind of start and end to the project. It's not gonna be a project that you don't want a project to kind of linger on and on and on, and there's no end date or no kind of final deliverable, like, so the customer knows, okay, we're done. Because that sometimes they can go, well, what about one more thing and one more thing? And you're like, wait, this is the project. Those are add-on things we didn't talk about. Like, I'm organizing this space. Well, can you come and do this other space too? Like while you're here, like just go in there and look at the other one. You're like, at that point, you're like, well, my quote is for organizing this room. And then if they want to say, you can go look at the other room and say, this is great. I would love to do this room for you as well. Let me get you a quote, and that's gonna be a separate project. So you have to make sure that you're clear that you can't slide it into the current one. You're gonna give a quote, it's gonna be a new project. It could run parallel, but doesn't mean that you can't just kind of slide work, because they'll want to kind of like, oh, can you just do this one thing? Or hey, this I just need this cabinet fixed, like cleared out or organized. I don't know. Like they'll kind of, and they won't mean to, but those kind of add on. Well, it's just a small little thing, right? You just add it on. So you have to be careful of kind of scope creep, and then what's the project. And then you do want a project that has a clear beginning and end date. Some services will kind of feel like especially I think more like graphic design, where you have like a deliverable and then it's revision after revision after revision, and you kind of go, oh my God, I'm on the 10th revision. We got to stop this because the project needs to end. So a lot of times on that, you'll say it's, this deliverable in 6 weeks, like this thing, and you get 2 revisions. That's kind of, so you factor those 2 revisions in your pricing. So, and then you limit it. If they want more revisions after that, fine, you can quote them again for additional revisions, but you kind of have to put some kind of finite guardrails around the scope of the project. The other thing is, okay, and then if you need to adjust, like they want to ask you for, hey, I need to do this other project, or I want to add this on, it's like, I would love to do that. We'd be happy that that's outside the scope of the original project. So you need to have a clear scope of work for that original project. I would love to do that for you. Totally can do that. And let me get you a scope of work for that and a quote for that specific job, that specific project. So you can't just roll it in under the current one. They have to be clear because they need to know it's a separate thing. And here's my quote for that. But you're happy to do it, you'd love to do it. Let me just get you a quote for that. And it's not part of the original, or it's not being amended to the original project scope. And with any kind of project base, you want to get some payment up front. So sometimes with the hourly, people will work on the hours and they'll invoice at the end. I always think that's a bad practice too, because you've done the work, you should get some money because you're putting out the work or the effort. So I always recommend getting some, especially with project base, you don't want to wait till the end to get your money. So you need to either get ideally all, or at least a partial payment at the beginning of the project to get started, because you're going to expend effort and time and money, perhaps, like you may have to buy equipment or resources or something to do the project. And you need to make sure that that shouldn't come out of your pocket. That doesn't come out of your that's something that they need to cover those expenses or that kind of time you've put into the project, instead of waiting to the very end. So ideally, I would love for you to get all the money up front. If that's not feasible, then I would say like it's half the payment up front to get started, and then another half, depending how long the project is. If it's an 8-week project, it might be half up front, half 30 days in, or it might be half up front, half on this first deliverable, and then, completion, or it might be 50% up front, 25% at this milestone, and then 25% at the end, or whatever it is to kind of, but that can be a negotiating thing. So you may ask for all up front. And then if they kind of balk at that, then you say, okay, I'm not giving you a discount, but you can say, okay, that's a way you can kind of negotiate and look like you're giving in a little bit, where I say I can need 50% up front, 25% here, and 25% at the end, or something like that. So you can kind of negotiate those payment terms, but you need to get some money up front because you're spending time, you're expending effort, time, and resources, and you need to be compensated for that instead of at the very end. And then if you can on project-based work, it's really great if you can transition this to some kind of retainer fee or retainer work at the end. So sometimes it's easier with like, I think like websites are always kind of easy, where you did the project to redesign the website, and then you have a retainer fee afterwards to kind of do maintenance and updates and that kind of stuff. And that way you can say, you have access to X number of hours a month, and you kind of pay a flat fee per month, and you kind of get this time from us. I was thinking like for organizing, it could be maybe you go in and then like, hey, I come in like every month and do a quick 1 hour check, or a touch up, not touch up, but like a tune up on the organizing. If they kind of let it go, then you can kind of come back in, and like if you pay me a retainer, I'll come in every 2 months and kind of tweak your space back to getting it back in line, because people will, slack off. Or you may come in and say, okay, it's a 2-hour tweak every 2 months. And if it's not, then I use those 2 hours and help you with another little tiny project or a space. Or you can ask me questions about things for that 2 hours. You can kind of offer that as kind of a ongoing retainer situation, where they're paying you a little bit per month for a limited amount of your time, but it helps bring in, some recurring revenue. It helps keep you in touch with customers that may not use your service very often, or it's like, there's like long periods in between maybe using your service. It just kind of keeps you top of mind. And then it just keeps you always in the forefront. And then like, oh yeah, I do need to do this bigger space. All right, I already have a relationship with Yolanda. Let's bring her back in for something big, a big project. Either on the project-based one, you need to track your actual hours spent. So you need to make sure, because you're pricing this out, you need to make sure that somehow you thought something was going to take 10 hours and it really takes 12. And if you aren't kind of tracking, you don't have to track every 6 minutes, but you have to track those hours to know, oh, okay, this really does take me 12 hours for this. In the future, I need to increase my project price to cover that extra time that I wasn't thinking I was spending. And if you don't track it, you really don't know that you're losing, those extra 2 hours. You don't realize they're they're in there, because it's kind of hard to tell sometimes. So you need to kind of keep tracking on the backside and then using that to make sure that your pricing is, you're capturing everything and you're priced right. Or if things are taking longer or people are kind of adding more things, these projects are a little bit bigger than you expected, then in the future you can increase your price accordingly. Oh, then just talk about retainer pricing. So ideally, if you can, for services, if you can move a customer over to some kind of monthly retainer fee, it's ideal. Again, it won't be as much as like a project or your like a project fee, but it gives that ongoing long-term relationship with the customer. It's kind of building that as opposed to being kind of a one and done. You're kind of going to always stay in their mind. They're going to see value from you all along. Then when they have that next big project, you're already going to kind of be in the queue and in their mind, like, oh, we really need it. Or if they bring something up in the kind of monthly things, then you can say, oh, this is going to kind of be a bigger project. Let's kind of scope that out. Or they kind of see the value you're providing and can give, and they're ready to kind of step up to the next big one when they're ready for that. But they know that you do good work and you kind of, and it's not like, oh, who was that I called like 6 months ago or a year ago when I did that? And they can't remember your name and you're like, I can't find where I paid them. And then they, it kind of keeps you in their sphere. It gives you that steady, kind of more predictable, it gives you a baseline of kind of predictable revenue, which is nice when you're so you're not having to always just be kind of, what's the next project? I gotta, kind of get a pipeline filled. It kind of gives you some kind of a nice little base. It gives you a closer relationship with those clients because you're going to be kind of in with them more often. You're going to touch base with them more frequently. You're not just touching base to say, hey, you got any work I need to do? You're going to be in there kind of always kind of providing value to them, and you can learn their business and their needs more because you can kind of personalize and maybe, tailor things to them because you know them so well. You've worked with them for so long. The downside is that sometimes clients might expect more out of the relationship. So that if you say it's going to be a 2-hour organizing tune-up, every month, they may slide in like, well, then it turns to 3, or they start talking and they, and they get in, like, then you just end up spending 3 hours with them and then it turns into 4, So, or they kind of go, hey, can you just do this one little thing over here? And it starts, they start kind of exceeding because they think they're paying you every month. So they feel like they kind of get more time from you than even if you agree to what's in the beginning, they kind of, or they don't realize I've kind of exceeded my time. So you have to kind of watch that and get that scope creep. They also think because I'm paying you every month, they might be able to, I can call you anytime I want, right? I can like ask you a question. I can, that you're more available to them than you might be because you do have other customers and clients. And sometimes it might mean that you're relying too heavily on one client. So say you have a retainer and they're paying you a good amount of money, then you don't want to focus on them to the exclusivity of not getting other clients or growing your business in other areas. Sometimes one client can kind of take up a lot of time, but if they go away, and I've seen that where, especially service-based business will have like 60% or more of their revenue tied up in one customer. And you're like, that customer goes away, which eventually, it can happen. It's not like an unheard of thing, no matter how great your relationship is. That's a big chunk of money you now got to suddenly refill. So you do need to make sure that you're still growing your pipeline and still servicing other clients. So if you lose, and that one client that's a retainer, or the retainer clients don't outweigh and become so big a part of your business that if one of those goes away, it's going to be really a hit to your business. The other one might be subscription. This, Danielle, I think if you could be doing this, it's more product-based, is subscription. And that's like, if you pay Netflix, you're paying so much a month to get X. It's the subscription boxes, like the Bark Box or the, maybe it's the Cookie of the Month Club. I don't know what it is, but there could be some kind of a subscription package that you offer your clients, which I think would be a really great way to, if you have a product, or sometimes services are hard to do this, although I've seen like Netflix technically is kind of a service, but I feel they're more of a product company because it's online, but they're offering products that are just digital products versus a service. Again, it's gonna be, a set amount of like, your subscription box has a set amount of like value or things in the box every month. It's at a set price point. It's recurring until somebody cancels, it just automatically kind of charges their credit card or whatever it is, and it gets shipped out, and it's like the first of the month, they all get shipped, but you have a set time, or it can be software, some different things online, digital products. There's some kind of membership sites, or not subscription, but I kind of think of membership sites being kind of like this, where it's a set amount a month, you get access to so much training or recordings or coaching or whatever it is. But you pay, to kind of keep getting new content or something new every month from that service, or that it's kind of products, but they're built kind of as a service, but they're really offering you a product, whether it's digital or physical. It's predictable, recurring revenue. It's great for customer retention. You're going to kind of be able, instead of customers kind of coming in, buying one-offs here and there, you're going to have that kind of regular customer retention, and they're going to kind of keep coming back every month because they're going to get a new box every month. It can be easier to manage your product inventory because I have X number of subscription boxes going out. I have to make these mini cookies for it, so you kind of have, it gives you a little bit of forecast versus, in a retail situation, you're like, I don't know who's going to buy the cookies today. So, it gives you a little more stability in your inventory and producing the product. And then you have consistent customer engagement. So you can talk to those customers, who they are, they're buying your regular stuff. You can send out surveys, they're being more invested in your product and your products and your company. And you have just more touch points. As long as you're servicing them correctly and with a high value, then you're going to have a lot more interaction with that customer base. And you can do things with them because you have that interaction in that relationship that you don't have with just a transactional coming in, buying from a retail store. You can do different options. So whether it's digital products or physical, you can do a flat rate per month. You can do like a tiered package, and depending on what you get, it could be usage based. A lot of software will be kind of usage or per user licensing. If you have 5 users a month, you pay X. If you have 10 users, you pay X. So, those are different. There's different options for kind of this subscription pricing. What I would say for products is you should always, there's a couple things for tiered pricing. I would look at this, again, it's offering different products at different tiers, or you might have, like, it's the cookie maybe it's a chocolate chip cookie in here, then it's the chocolate chip cookie with gold leaf, and then I don't even know what the next, then there's the chocolate chip cookie that's the monster cookie that's the size of your head. I don't know what they are, but there's different ways to kind of tier up products where you can give customers options that they may want a chocolate chip cookie, but then they have different ones they can kind of buy. This also works for services. So it might be, it's the quick tune up, touch up where you show me a video and we do like an online call and video, and you show me your closet and I give you tips, like a 2-hour like video one, versus I come into your home and I do one room, versus I'll do your whole house, or something, or I do your home and your office or whatever. So you can kind of tier these products, these services, products and services to like, for products, you see this a lot with a good, better, best. So it's the same product kind of in serving the same general application, but then you kind of level it up for a second. Here's kind of the entry level, here's, kind of your middle tier, and then here's kind of your top tier. So same thing with services you could offer. Here's kind of the organizing tune-up. Here's, one room, one closet, one area. Here's the whole house. Like you can kind of start offering these packages. And it gives customers options. It's really great and you can package these in bundles. Maybe it's like I do your packages could be a service plus these like an ongoing like organizing thing. Like maybe you do like a small group organizing session like a coaching session outside of just the one tune-up, or it's these products can be offered. You can get a deal on these products through my affiliate program, kind of a thing. So there's different ways you can kind of package up products and services, or just products or just services into these packages. It also lets you kind of test different pricing. So you can, if you want to say offering, you could have an entry level, a middle, and a top tier. Well, you then that top tier, if you're not sure, like you can start testing some pricing to say, what if I really kind of made you know, a top tier that was like really meaty, has all the bells and whistles. Is anyone going to buy it? Like you can start getting where people are pricing, and maybe you can kind of say, oh, maybe I am too high priced, or you may be too low priced on your entry level, and everybody's kind of buying that top tier. Then you go, oh, wait a minute, I need to shift things because more people are interested in that top tier, not getting anybody at this lower tier. So you can kind of start seeing how you can price things and kind of doing different levels based on, and it could be even with products, you can kind of look at where are people buying more things, and you can kind of shift. Like if no one's buying this product here, but they're buying this really top tier, then you go, okay, I need to kind of shift things. Maybe my target customer is really more this premium customer, and it's not this kind of entry level that I thought. So I can kind of start shifting my products towards that type of customer. The other thing is, I would suggest if you're going to do kind of tiered pricing, is to keep it to kind of 3 tiers or 3 packages or 3 bundles or whatever it is. More than that, people get confused. There's all sorts of kind of research done on, especially in grocery stores, and the people that they go in there and they have like options of like jams. That was like the most famous study. They had like jams on a table, and like they tracked people trying them and then who purchased what. And they found the fewer number of jams on a table. If they had 20 on there, people were like, the sales went down. They couldn't, people were overwhelmed. They didn't understand, they had too many choices. They didn't know which one to buy. They just said they bought none. But they found when you kind of narrow that down, people feel like they're still getting a choice, but it's not so overwhelming to them. And they kind of found that 3 is kind of the magic number, sometimes 4, but you want to keep it really to 3 tiers or packages. You want to have kind of entry level or a minimum viable product, is what they call it, an MVP. That entry level one needs to be, again, minimal viable. Minimal is the key word. Minimal amount of time, minimal amount of cost. It's kind of it's a good product. It's not cheap. It's not bad, but it's more de-featured, or it's more kind of basic. It's that entry level, or it's your minimal amount of time. You're not putting in a ton of time in that entry level product, and it's going to be reflected in it, and it's going to be clearly marketed and messaged as that kind of. So the expectations are set. You're not getting white glove service for this entry level product. That middle tier, surprisingly, is going to be usually your top seller. If you've priced these and done these right, people will go, oh, that entry level, that's good, but I kind of need a little bit more than that. Then they're going to see that top premium one and go, and some people will buy that. And that ensures that you're not leaving money on the table, because you don't want to you want to have an offer for those people that are willing to step on up and pay this higher price for it. But most people will see the lower one, go, I need a little more than that. They'll see the higher one, go, yeah, I'm not quite up there. And they'll select that middle, which is what you want. You want them to kind of, your middle tier should be your most popular seller. So again, if you're seeing more middle and higher tier being sold and not here, then you need to shift your offer up. So your middle tier becomes entry level, your top tier becomes your middle, and you have a new top tier, because your customer base is telling you, I want the more value, I want the more, or if you see shifting the other way, then you think, okay, wait a minute, maybe I need to shift and offer something. I'm losing sales at the bottom end, and maybe my premium is too much out of whack. So my middle becomes premium, my MVP now becomes kind of the middle, and maybe I beef it up a little bit, and then I have a new kind of lower end to kind of get, sometimes the MVP product is really to kind of get people in the door, is to kind of get them to have a small taste of what you can provide without like investing. If they're not really quite sure, it gives them the way to kind of know, like, and trust you, and to kind of see what your service is going to be like. Are we going to fit? What's your product like? Is this going to be something I value? And then if the idea is that kind of gives them the entry into you and your business, and then they would upsell into those other tiers. All right. Questions, break? where are we at time? Oh, a little 11:10, a little over on that one, but again, you'll get these slides. It's a lot of information. All right, so Yolanda and Danielle, do you want another 5-minute break? Or I'm happy to keep going, it's up to you.
I'm fine. I'm fine. I don't know if Yolanda wants a break or not.
I don't need one. I'm good.
Okay.
We'll
Thank you.
just, because now we're gonna kind of, the slides actually won't be as long. Because again, it's going to, but it could be, let's go into it. So some of the common mistakes that I see with people in their pricing, and I will tell you right now, most likely, most common one is underpricing. You are probably underpricing and this is why you're here. So you hopefully don't underprice as you kind of launch your business or add on other services and products into your business. But underpricing is usually the most common thing we see. And there's lots of reasons for this, and we can go, there's a whole like a psychology about why we underprice. And one is usually imposter syndrome, especially in services where you're not like, well, man, no one's going to pay me this. Like, no, like seems way too much. Like you factor an hourly rate, or you're like, there's no way someone's paying me this amount of money, or they're not going to, if I see a total package, you're like, you just think people aren't going to pay that. They will. But you think it's where you don't see the value that you bring. And we always underestimate our own value. We always think that, oh, I'm sure, or you see some like really cheap person out there and think, oh, well, that's where it is. And I'll never be able to compete down there. And so it's a lot of reasons for the imposter syndrome. I will say that you have value and you need to talk to people that can help you show you what that value is. Talk to customers about why they like your service. Talk to people that you know in business, and then kind of, what do you bring, and have them. And usually, you believe in a product, it's easier because that's a separate thing from you, but especially in services, it's kind of hard to say, I'm worth it, and I have this value. I bring this to the table. Think about how you've helped clients and how you helped customers and what benefit they get. And then that can help reinforce that, your products and services are valuable, they're worth it, and they do benefit somebody. They do solve a problem, they do provide joy, they do, give people a smile, whatever it is that you bring to that customer. It is a valuable service that's worth your time, effort, and the money that you're going to get. The other thing with pricing is most likely it's underestimating the true costs. Like we talked earlier about all the costs that are built in. There's things that you think, oh, it's just, and you're not factoring in either all the hidden things that you don't see on a service side that you're not factoring in that you do. Like, oh, if I had to pay somebody, what would that be? I need to factor that in. I'm doing it myself, but I'm not covering that cost. Or on products, just like making sure you have all the raw materials done right, but then all the other things like your marketing and your lease and your overhead and all those kind of expenses being built into that product cost to make sure that your pricing, that you have the margins that you think you're getting and the profit that you're making. The other thing with underpricing is, boy, discounts and sales. This is a huge one where people discount things off and then they end up in really like no profit. They either don't have their costs and everything in line, but they just offer discounts and sales all the time, and they're killing themselves. They're killing their profit, and they're training their customers. So what happens, and I see this a lot where I don't know how many products you've bought where you're just like, the product's always there's gonna be another sale like in 2 weeks. So why would I ever buy it at full price? Because they do sales and discounts like all the time. And so I'm like, you're just training your customers to wait. It's like, I don't have to buy it now. I'll just buy it 2 weeks from now when I know they go on sale again. And so you have to be really, really careful with discounts and sales to have a specific reason for them, a specific time. And you're not training your customers to say, well, if you can offer discounts and sales all the time, that must be the real price. And then now you've trained them that lower price is the price they should pay, and they shouldn't pay the regular price. So that's a bad cycle businesses can get into. And then sometimes probably larger companies, maybe not starting out, but you think you're going to be able to undercut the competition. So you come out with a low price and you're hoping that the volume is going to increase. The volume will make up giving that big discount. It usually doesn't. So you have to be really clear that if you're going to go out and trying to take market share, or you're going to try to, I'm just going to sell at a low price to get customers, and then I'm going to increase it later. It's really hard to do that because you've now set that new kind of lower price. And then it's hard, really hard, whether it's product or a service, to then increase that later, because you set that value in the customer's mind of that initial lower price. You're also, again, going and undercutting. You're never going to get that volume. It'd be very difficult to get the volume to make up all, or if you're doing it, better calculate that very carefully. How much volume do I need to make up that, offset that discount I just gave, that profit I just gave away? I better make that up, that profit in volume down at the end. And again, it can lead your customers to view your product as cheap. You never want to go out and set a price thinking, oh, I'll do this now. I'll get 6 months. I'll get all these customers and I'll raise my price up. Nope. Those customers are going to think, I pay this. That's the price it should be, because now I've set that floor, set that expectation that it's this lower price, and then increasing it up to a real price later is going to be much more difficult. So the key thing about, we already talked about these, to make sure you're not underpricing, is to research competitors' pricing, know where you are in the market, do that competitive matrix and see kind of who's offering what benefits, what prices. And your pricing should make you feel a little uncomfortable. If you're like, oh, this is a good price, everyone's going to pay for that, you're underpriced. You need to be slightly uncomfortable with the price that you give. And then I really think for services, again, doing that matrix, whatever price you think you should charge, you probably should add like 10 to 20%. That's usually what I see people are under, especially for services, because you're valuing your own time yourself. So it's kind of hard. You feel weird to putting a value on yourself sometimes, and you think, oh, it's not really worth it. But more than likely, a 10% bump is going to be pretty small in the overall. No one's going to really kind of notice it, but it'll make a big difference to your profit. But it's not going to be like, you're not going doubling the price to where you think it should be. And then you should always monitor your costs. So I would say, if it's not annual, I mean, it should be annual, if not every 6 months, depending on when things are really chaotic in the market. It should be, during COVID, we were monitoring prices literally every month. We were changing. We had 6 price increases in 1 year because costs were so out of control. It was changing so fast. Things are settled down now, but you need to make sure that, you're looking at those costs coming in, especially for like raw materials and in the food industry. But even like for services, at least every year you should be checking to make sure, like, was it costing me to do this? Do I have more am I having to buy more equipment, or am I using more gas to drive around? And I didn't realize gas prices, and I have to travel and I'm not factoring that in, like whatever those are. So it's kind of making sure that you adjust and review your pricing and review your costs on an annual basis at the very minimum. Probably not so much overpricing, but that can happen too. Sometimes I've talked to small businesses that, kind of where the person with the product or service really thinks their product or service is going to like be the greatest thing since sliced bread. It's going to be, man, everyone's going to want it. It's like, it's going to solve world peace. I don't know, like whatever it is, like they kind of over perceive the value because they find it so valuable. They think everyone's going to find it just as valuable and they're going to have all this stuff and everyone's going to want it. Usually not, but then they price it accordingly. Like, wow, this is going to solve the world's problems. And it may be a great product, but again, it still has to fit within the market, and it can't be like, it may be the greatest thing, but it's going to be hard to jump out there sometimes, and that messaging and marketing doesn't kind of align with that pricing strategy. Sometimes the costs are just way too high, especially when you're starting out. You're not buying things in bulk. You're buying things at a higher price point for your raw materials. You may So you may have a higher cost structure because you can't buy in bulk because you just don't have the volumes yet. So again, so you may again, if you understand that, but you're like, hey, as I increase my volumes, I can buy more bulk, I'll get that cost down. That can be an option, but you have to be, and so maybe you take a little smaller profit in the beginning. If you feel like you can't start out at a higher price, I would still say try to start out at a higher price. But that might be something where over time you think, okay, I can negotiate as I get volumes, these costs will go down. Tricky strategy, but sometimes most likely those costs don't ever go down, and people kind of go out there and they don't realize, or by the time they can go to bulk pricing, the prices have increased for all raw materials and now they're still paying higher. So usually that's kind of thing, if their costs too high and they just can't get them down. When I did the market down and you realize that target cost and they think, oh, that's fine, I'll be higher cost right now, but I can get down there. It's a tricky thing, and they end up being their costs are too, and their profits just stay, they just can't get those profits margin increase. Sometimes they're going into like a premium product and they want to go into a commodity market. There's some markets, if I'm selling paper towels, it's really hard. Paper towels are pretty commodity. There's going to be Brawny does a lot of advertising to try to establish a brand for people to buy their brand versus the other, but it's a really, really tough market. It's really perceived as a commodity. Being a premium in a commodity starting out, you don't have the advertising dollars that Brawny does or the market share to get the volume to be in a commodity market. So just kind of so you're probably going to be overpriced because it's going to be hard to see the value in a commodity. And then, like I said, your positioning, your messaging, you may be overpriced because you're just not really, it may look overpriced because you're just not really messaging and marketing the product or service. So customers understand why you are a higher price versus the competition. So again, that's a key thing is, even if it's worth it, if you can't communicate it or they don't understand it, they're not going to understand why you're up there. So then you just kind of look overpriced compared to what's out there in the market. So when you research competitive pricing, you want to always revisit your cost structure, maybe look at alternatives. If your costs are, higher than that target, like if you do that market down and your target cost is here and your cost is higher, are there alternatives or things that you can do to kind of bring your costs back down the line? Always look at value from the customer's perspective. So you always want to make sure that you're looking at, do they value, you can put things into a product or a service, but if no one values it, no one's going to pay that extra for it. So you have to really think like, I want to offer, and that's kind of hard because you're like, I want to offer this, but it just may not be valued. It may be the wrong thing. So your customers will tell you like, if I develop a new product or a new service, they're going to say, yeah, that's great, but I don't, you want to get their feedback on, is that the right direction or not? Would they pay that or not? Is it something that your existing customers find valuable or not? Or new customers, you want to make sure that, hey, are they going to, you can add all the bells and whistles in, but if they don't value them, or your target customers, maybe you need a different target customer that would value it. But if your current base doesn't, then you have to look at either changing the product or service or shifting it to maybe trying to attract a different type of customer. And then I always suggest like talking to, if you lose, I'd say if you're like quoting, or if you bid on a job, or if you're like different with the other kind of ones, you're like putting a proposal in, if you didn't get the business, call the person up and just ask them why you didn't. I would tell them all the time, like if I had vendors quoting on a project and one didn't get it and one called me, I would tell them, I would be very frank with them about why I picked the other guy. And sometimes it could be nothing to do with pricing. It's more likely, somebody, the VP knew this one, and so we had to use that one versus yours. He came in and said, I want to use my guy I know over here. Okay, that was the decision. Or it could be, so it may not even at all be related to price. It could be other things, or it might be, hey, your price was here, but it just was, there's ways to, like, it maybe was, they didn't see the value that you were going to bring for the price or something. So again, trying to figure out why you didn't get the business is valuable if you can, for those kind of, depending on the product or service. So if you're raising prices for products, it's really, it's hard to raise a price on an existing product. Usually what you have to do is you add a new product into the line and you discontinue the old product. And that new product will have different features or benefits or something else that then you could increase the price because it has an increased value. So again, your customers will tell you, you may want to add the next brownie thing, is it a brookie? When you put a brownie and a cookie together, like, I don't know, but your customers will tell you like, I really love brownies, and I'm sure somebody gave them feedback to put the two things together. Or if you have a new product, test it out first before you let's go and see if customers want it. So those are things that you can get back. Like you can do little pilot samples or tests and saying, hey, we're trying this out. What do you think? And get customer feedback, because they may like it and then say, hey, and this is the price for it. And they may like it, but they may not be willing to pay the extra for it. So you always have to kind of weigh those. It's not just that they want it, but that they want it at the price that you can deliver it. So you want to make sure the customers will pay for that added feature. And then again, you always want to communicate if you're discontinuing an older product and you have a new replacement product for it and it's higher, the customers are going to use that old one as the base, even if it was 10 years ago. Like, okay, if they're using that product as a base, why is this new and improved one? And it can't be just improved with little quotes. It's got to have some real meaningful improvement to the customer and then to justify that higher price, which usually you can, because you're adding more value, more benefit at the same time, and you need to get paid for that additional cost. Those are all cost adders, and when you need to have that equivalent price adder. You can't just keep adding features and benefits in at costs and not getting some kind of return and just having it keep shrinking your margins. For services, I'd suggest building, if you're doing anything, if it's a one-off project, that's one thing again, but if it's more recurring or it's like a contract that you can build in, or I would say if it's a one-off, like every project you do, every new customer, increase your price to that customer, even if it's 10%, increase that up. It's like, okay, just start, and you'll start feeling where you get a little bit of resistance, and you can kind of say, okay, well, here's my new price ceiling. And then you can do that for a while. And then again, start testing a higher price and start doing just a little bit of adder every time you quote. If it's a contract where you have like an annual contract with somebody or a subscription service that you're doing, like you sign up for so many months, then maybe you build, and then it's month to month, maybe you build into the service, an annual increase once a year. Like a cost of living, people understand really kind of a cost of living raise. So a cost of living price increase, even if it's a 2% or 4% or some amount that kind of automatically skews up, or you put something in the contract saying, hey, we revisit the price, annually, we come back and renegotiate or something like that. You don't want somebody to continue to pay for something 5 years down the road, the same price they were paying, 5 years ago. Your costs aren't the same 5 years ago. Your value is not the same as 5 years ago. Your skill set's not the same as 5 years ago. Making sure if you have scope of work that you don't slide it into a current contract, that you would requote for, it's a new project, and it's not, you can't just fold things into a current project. If you quote a new one, then you can say, hey, here's kind of a clear, and you can adjust pricing at a time as opposed to kind of rolling into something existing. Or if it's out of scope, then it doesn't get rolled into the current one. It needs to be, all right, that's great. I would love to quote you on that. And I'll, here's my price for this additional product or service that's separate from this scope of work. And then if you can do any kind of bundles or packages, that's a way to increase price. Again, because you're increasing the perceived value, even though the cost of each individual item may not have increased. Bundling all the things together, people will pay for convenience. They'll pay for, ease, something easy. They pay for, like, you do all the work for me and it's all bundled together. Like maybe it's a cookie party package where you bundle things together, and the individual price of all the kind of cookie, and maybe it's not just cookies, but it's like decorations and some balloons, or I don't know, whatever. It's like a whole like cookie party box. But in each individual thing of like the balloons or the streamers or the whatever, are like, they're not much, but packaging it all together, I can charge more for it And because you're saving them time and effort and you're giving them the complete, like a one-stop shop, like, great, I take the package, I got all the stuff. You know, that might be some way to package or bundle. You know, you always think about the baker's dozen where you get 12, but you get 13, you know, there's things like that you can kind of, or it's, you know, you can bundle like your top 10 cookies in one package or something. There's things you can do to kind of bundle things together, or again, trying to add other things into the bundle, because if it's just the product by themselves, they'll go, well, a cookie is $2, $2, $2, $2, and now you're charging me, you know, $100 for 10 cookies doesn't make sense. But if I can package in other things with it, that don't cost as much, but they seem like a better value and they seem like more value to the customer, they'll pay for those things. Should you publish pricing from products? You're always going to publish pricing. I mean, no one's going to go try to buy a widget and not have a price for it. Whether that's a digital product or a physical product, they're going to know your cookies are X amount per cookie, your, you know, software that you purchase is X amount, you know, all those kind of things. Your online course is going to be X amount, like it's going to have some kind of pricing. Again, be careful of that MSRP list price versus sale price. So just when you're out there, there's reasons why people do those things, but just kind of know when you see pricing out there that you're going to see some kind of price listed. For services, I always say in general, if you're offering something online or if customers contact you, in general, I say publish pricing, because think about it from the customer's perspective. If I'm going to use you as a coach or an organizer, and there's no pricing on there, I have no idea what this costs. Like, I have no budget from you. I have no idea like where this is. It's really difficult for me as a customer to go just to randomly call somebody up, because it could be way on my price point and I don't want to waste my time. Like, if you're not even or I may be way off in what I think this should cost, and I need to reset my expectations. So if there's nothing out there, I'm just gonna I'm more hesitant to call, and I'm more hesitant to ask the question, because you're like, and nowadays with the internet and so much information at our fingertips, people are going to kind of expect, again, they're doing that. 80% of people are doing all that research in the beginning. And if they see kind of these guys pricing and they don't see one for you, they're going to kind of like, well, these guys at least have me. I know what to expect here. This is a wild card over here. If you don't want to publish the actual price, you could do things like a range, or you could do starting at, and you can always like tailor a package. Like you can say, you know, so you can kind of give a range if you don't want to tie into a specific number, because it might really depend on the project that you're doing. But you say normal, you know, whole home organizing ranges from X to X or something, like, or one room organizing is X to X, or a kitchen is this, or a bedroom is this, or something. So you could give them some ideas of where, and they can self-select themselves out of, because they may go, oh, I didn't realize it was going to cost this, and or they're not the right customer for you. If you offer the package, those tiered packages, you really need to kind of have some pricing with it, so they understand, again, how these things fit. It gives them expectations. It also vets potential customers. You don't want people wasting your time calling you, and then you get through this discovery call, and then you go, oh, and here's kind of the price of my package. And they're like, oh, well, that's way too much. I didn't know. And you just wasted time, and you wasted their time. I mean, and a lot of times I want to know if something's not in my budget up front. I don't want to waste my time, and you don't want to waste your time. So kind of weeds out people that think I should get stuff for like super cheap. You're like, no, not really. I'm not super cheap. I'm not worth it. If you want super cheap, go somewhere else. They're not a good fit for you. Kind of weeds out those customers that will take time away from you, kind of up front, and establishes those expectations. So even if it's a range or a price point, it lets them know you're worth X, and I'm not the guy down here at the bottom. I'm not maybe the super one up here, but here's kind of where, and this is the guardrails. This is where we're playing. You know, I'm not going to charge you $10,000 for a job, and you're going to come in thinking you're going to get it for $1,000. That is you need to know. My range is 8 to 10. Here's my minimum, here's my floor, or here, or I start at 8. Don't come in at $1,000 and try to needle me down, because that's not gonna happen. So they need to know too that you're not playing at that $1,000 range, you're in this range up here. Again, and you can always change prices, especially if it's online. If you want to change it tomorrow, change it tomorrow. Like, you could try something and then you can get feedback, and if it seems off, just change it the next day. No one's gonna know. Like, who cares? And if you don't want to publish pricing online for services for some reason, if you feel uncomfortable or you really don't want to publish a range, I still suggest you at least publish a range or a starting at. But if you don't want to, then I would make sure that if a customer contacts you to do like a discovery call, then I would say, okay, before that discovery call, you have a paging or a pricing one pager. So the same thing, you send a PDF document, here's kind of the packages, or here's where I start at, or here's the ranges, because you need to weed out that customer or that potential customer if they're not a fit. If your pricing is 8 to 10 and they really think they think it's 1,000, they need to get out. Like, you don't need to get through a discovery call, and then at the end you talk about pricing, and then they go, oh, I didn't realize that's too much for me. So I would still, so they can kind of self-select out, and you're kind of vetting them and getting them out of that, when they're not going to be, there's just too much disparity between what your expectation and their expectation. So that's the other option. I would have that ready to send out, and then they can either like cancel their discovery call, or they can continue on, but at least you've set expectations about this service is going to charge this or in this range. And if you're okay with that range, then we can have a conversation. Pricing tips, I'll go through a couple of these. You always want to view pricing from the customer's perspective. Again, we think our products or services are valued here. It only really matters what the customer values. If they don't see the value, if they don't understand it, it's not a benefit to them. It doesn't matter what we think, it matters what they think and what their perceptions of our value to the price. Don't race to the bottom. I mean, too many times and probably not so much small business, but I see sometimes people will like, well, all these low guys are out here charging X, so I need to charge that too. And you're like, but you offer so much more. And that's where you have to do that kind of product comparison to see what they're offering for that price. And to see, what value can you add to say, hey, that customer's value that helps offset, like, you don't need to be, because you're not going to win. You're a small business. You don't have the volume, you don't have the brand positioning, you don't have the, all that kind of establishment to be a low end price, or you don't, you're offering your cost you won't have the bulk price cost, you won't have the cost position to be that low end. So you don't want to race to the bottom and think you can start low and then increase it down the road, because you've just set the price out there by going, it's really hard to, and I've been with brands that had like the entry level low end product, and then they tried to take that product upstream and move it from kind of that, not cheap, but it's the price point product, and they've tried to take that brand and that product up into different levels. Really, usually you can't do it. What they end up doing is they have to really create an entirely separate brand, entirely different product under that new brand, because the consumers equate that brand with that low end product and won't pay more for it. They think because I used to be in power tools, and so Black & Decker was the low end. DeWalt, when they took the Black & Decker originally, branded it DeWalt and tried to sell it at a higher premium price point. Or no, they took Black & Decker and tried to take it up to a premium price point and extend the product line up. People were like, Black & Decker's the low end. Black & Decker's the thing the drill I use once a year, and I just need something to do it, and they could not extend that brand up because it had already established a low price point position. So they end up launching DeWalt. In the beginning, it was the same exact product. They put a different brand on it. They tweaked it a little bit, but it was not that much different, and they could charge it, and they put a ton of marketing, a ton of advertising, a ton of money into building that brand. And now DeWalt is a true premium brand, and they've stepped it up, but they could not take, so you have to be careful when you've been at the bottom and you try to take it up, because you'll want to at some point. It's really hard to be at the bottom. Like, margins are super thin. It's all about volume, and you're not there yet as a small business. Price on value, not commodity. Again, focus on that messaging. Here's the thing with discounts, because you're gonna get it's the Black Friday sales, or it's the Mother's Day thing, or it's something, somebody will offer some kind of sale or discount. And you can discount. I would do it with caution. I would just say, be very careful when you discount, and have a very specific reason to do it. So you might, I would say, instead of discounting, because what happens with discounting is then you're training that customer to wait for the next sale, or to think, oh, well, if you could discount, then it must not be worth this price. You've now kind of anchored them down to a lower price, and you can start devaluing your product by discounting. What I would say, instead of discounting something, is if you're negotiating with a customer and they're like, wow, that's a little, that price or something, and they want to ask for a discount, I'd rather you offer some kind of value or offer something extra as opposed to discounting. So you could offer like another part of the service or something, and then you can kind of say, okay, I can add, because usually the cost of adding that adder isn't going to be as expensive or cost as much as a discount down. And you're not devaluing the price. That price point still stays up here. You're just saying, okay, what if I do another one-on-one session with you? Okay, it's an hour of your time. That's going to be worth more than I discount 20% off the thing. So be thinking about ways you can add value as opposed to discount. The other thing you can do instead of discounting, if people are constantly kind of saying wanting a discount, then maybe you are overpriced for that product service. Well, so what I would do instead is there a way to de-feature the product or service to hit that if they want a lower price? So if I was offering a service, it's a lot of times products will offer more of a de-feature, bare bones product, and that's for those people that are kind of looking really, what's my lowest price I can get? So, but for services, it might be, okay, so I can offer you a lower price, but I'm going to take out some benefits. So maybe it's a coaching program, and they meet, the normal package is one-on-one hour every week with the coach for whatever the 8-week program is. Well, then it's like, okay, I'm not going to give you if I'm going to give you a lower price, I'm taking out value. So I'm going to only meet with you once a month instead of once a week, or it's every 2 weeks. So I'm taking costs out to hit. And so now the costs are going down, but the value or the price is going down, but that differential is still there. So think about ways to, okay, if you really do need a lower price and you want to work with them, you think they're going to be a good client. You don't want somebody just kind of nickel and diming you. But if it's like, wow, that's just a little bit more than I expected, then okay, let's look at ways to, I can take out some costs in the service, or I can shift some of the work to your team. So there's other times where it's like, oh, I can shift you can do this work and I won't do this work. And then that means I'm shifting some of that cost burden to you, and you're getting a lower price, but you're taking on extra work that I would have done if you think they can do it. So that's a way to kind of shift or de-feature the product or service. As again, you're taking the price down, but you're taking out that cost. You're taking out some of the, and then they understand too, you're not going to get this because you want this lower price, but it might be what you need to, like with their budget, they might just go, I really do need that. I'm like, I'm okay shifting some of that extra work to me, or not having as much, I'm taking out you're taking out some of that value that I can take the price down for. If you ever do discount, I always say get something for it. So if you're going to offer some discount. You really need to make sure that the volume increase is going to be worth that discount. Sometimes you can do it for like a short period of time for, like, it might be with, like you're trying to get it from a new group of customers. It's like, okay, maybe you offer some kind of, like you partner with somebody else that has that customer base, and maybe you offer discount to that partner's customer base to kind of get them to try your product, because it's more marketing and awareness at that point, and it's to get into a different market or a different customer base that you don't have access to. So you're kind of paying for access. So the discount is because you're trying to get to a new customer, or there's a specific reason you're giving the discount. You're trying to get in front of a whole new customer set or a new market, or you're trying to pin it. You've got a new product and you need to get it out to the market to get some feedback. I think oh yeah, beta users. So that's another thing too. When you have a new product or service, you might offer a discounted version for people trying it for the first time, people testing it out, people like, so you're like, hey, in exchange for feedback and, specifics or customer review or testimonial, something like that, where you will give a discount if they do this X on the back end first. So it's for a specific reason. Again, don't have constant sales. You're just going to train the customer. I knew it. Someone I worked with at his previous company, swear to God, it was like, he said there were sales every 2 months. This is a sale. And he goes, we just trained people to wait for the next sale. No one ever bought it at full price. But once they got to that cycle, it was really hard to break out of that, because people you just trained them to wait, because there's another sale. And it wasn't like where they had to purchase it. Like there was no driver to purchase it like right now. They had the time. I can wait another month or two before, because it was a big ticket item, and it wasn't like it was something they needed, but it wasn't like I have to buy it right now. The other thing is, I would say, establish what's called anchor pricing. So that's when we do those tiers, or you see that MSRP, that's what's called an anchor price. There's a whole psychology of pricing, a lot of books about it. Really interesting if you ever want to read about it. But that establishes an anchor. What you're doing is you're anchoring that higher price in the mind of your customer, so that all of the other pricing is being compared up to that higher price. And so everything else will look like a much better deal because they're comparing it to that anchor. So we want to set, sometimes you want to set a high price, even if you have that premium package that no one ever buys. Having it out there will help you sell more of the middle package, because you've anchored their expectations to that top one for 10,000. So now that middle one at 8,000 looks like a deal, and the one at 6,000, like, is still a deal, but like, oh, that's not quite enough. So you're giving kind of like the full, the full package and the full price. And then everything else you've set their expectation, and they compare it to that higher price, versus if you only have one on there, there's no comparison. Or if you have a lower and a middle and no top, people will now anchor to that middle, and then the bottom one will look better, when in reality that you would have sold a lot more in the middle tier because of that anchor at the top. Or that's why they have the MSRP. Even if people know no one pays it, I've set the anchor at 10,000, even if my list price is 8,000, so it's like, but now people think the value is 10, even though all day long you were just going to sell it at 8, and 10 is kind of an inflated anchor price and then MSRP. So think about when you do that in your pricing, especially if you do. And then, do you ever wonder why when you go into retail, you always see pricing ending with an odd number, like it's $9.99, or it's $7.49, or it's $7.48 or something like that, or that's an even number, but they always have some kind, usually it's a 9. And it's more of a retail thing, but it's like, again, a psychological pricing. So even if you do pricing online, I would suggest your packages are $4.99, $6.99, $8.99, as opposed to 500, 700, 800, whatever numbers I said. Because there's a whole psychology of pricing about using that kind of odd number with a 9. One is that people round down. So if I say it's $6.99, they'll round in their head, they're going to round down to 6 and not up to 7. Don't know why we do it. We just do it. The second thing is that some people will go, oh, it's $6.99. And they, again, it's, some things are unconscious in our back of our minds. And they think, or it's $6.98 or $6.97 even. Sometimes you'll see that. They'll think, oh, well, they've shaved off every penny they could because trying to give me a better price. Like they took pennies off. They were that like, no, they didn't take pennies off, but they, in their mind, they think, oh, they really, that's a round number, sounds kind of made up, or like, oh, it's $700. Like there was no thought to it. But a $6.99 makes it think like somebody really calculated and really thought hard about that being the number, as opposed to $7. Seven's like, yeah, good enough, $7. $6.99, man, they worked. There was some real thought and real reasoning, whether there is or not, behind that number, that price at a $6.99 versus $7. It's all psychology. That's why it's an art and a science on pricing. So those are some things to think about when you actually do your pricing. Again, just to recap, we're at the end. Know your costs, know your customers, know your target margin, know your competition. Again, establish that value, that messaging and positioning all need to align with whatever price you put out there, so the customers align the value with what they're getting with that price. Pick one strategy or model and go with it. Like, and you can have like some different ones for different types of products. You could combine some of these together if you're like, oh, well, I like it this way for this, but I want to add this feature in from over here. You know, these are models to then, but they're not set in stone. So you can adjust them to based on, and you can always change your price too. It's not locked in. Just because you have it today doesn't mean you can't change it tomorrow. But whatever price you set, be confident in that number. Have done your research, have thought through, have a strategy while you're picking it, and then pick it and go. You've got to put a price out there at some point, and it is what it is, but you've thought through and kind of done your homework, then it's the best it can be, and then adjust and monitor as you go on. Again, knowing how your costs are working on the backside, understanding how things are, you know, what you estimated to what actual is, and tracking that, and adjusting your pricing as you go forward. So those things are all, there's a lot of information in there. Even if you don't do it all, if you start kind of looking at one area, then another area, and kind of take different pieces and parts and start kind of working through that pricing. It is a lot. I've worked at companies where we've had entire departments that do nothing but pricing. So it can be complex, it can be convoluted, but again, kind of knowing these basics will help you then at least you feel confident. So you're not just like throwing something against a wall, like, I hope that's the right price, or, well, this competitor's charging it, so it must be the right price. Well, they could be at a whole different back end to get to that, or they may not have any idea in their pricing and just threw a number at the wall. So you need to have kind of some structure, some foundation, some research, and then you just gotta go forth and raise your prices. And that is the end.
Thank
So-
you so much. Thank you so
Thank
much. I really
you.
needed that, especially when you talked about like underpricing, because I do that a lot
Yeah.
with myself. And then sales too. Like I'm always having a sale. So those things is really good. And then just helping me to figure out like my price point, because that's what I was scared about when I go to market to grocery stores. I wasn't comfortable with the price that I had, and I didn't want to sell myself or oversell myself.
Yeah.
So yeah, but thank you very much.
Oh, good.
Thank you as well.
Yeah, if you have any other questions, I'm here. And then like when you get with Danielle, you said you signed up with the mentor?
Yes, I did, like 2 days ago.
Yeah. So they usually, of course, they usually are pretty quick. Within like next week, you should be getting assigned somebody.
Okay.
And like, if you have more questions, I know all the mentors, they can bring me in for like a one-on-one session for like a deeper dive into pricing or a very specific pricing question. But the mentors are really good. They know a lot about business and pricing as well. I mean, they know, you can always ask them questions, but they can always bring me in too for a separate session. As you get down into it, or as you start working more specifics, I'm happy to jump back in.
All right, thank you so much. That'll be
Yeah.
really helpful.
That's what we're here for you as a resource. So whatever you need, just make sure that,